reason. I don't. Today, the other one, we've already read the preface. We're going to read the introduction. All right, today, just in the preface and introduction of these books, there's so much drop, so we're going to make sure to get all that info, and then we'll proceed to the next chapters as the days go. All right, we're going to get through these books, all right? Much love.
I want to show you some things that I don't think you even knew existed. It goes against everything Manifest Destiny teaches about Native Americans. And I want you to know this part of our history because people erased it, and we'll get to that later on in the program. Erased it intentionally. Erased it intentionally. That's an important part of it.
The cover-up of, let alone Native American sites, why would so many people be covering up the evidence of earlier civilizations in the Americas? I think some people have called it a colonial cover-up, a colonial archaeological conspiracy.
There's two sides to this story. In one side of the story is the way America was conquered by basically Anglo-Saxons, and in that conquest of the Americas, what they confronted was an indigenous people who had inhabited that realm for tens of thousands of years, we now know. And the first thing they did was to attempt to exterminate them physically, to get them out of the way. And when that became objectionable, the next measure was to exterminate their culture, to rub it out, to pour scorn upon it, to say that it was of no value, that in a sense, the absurd and monstrous argument was that the Native Americans deserved what was done to them because they were supposedly not capable of any high culture. We now know that that's completely untrue, and that was a conspiracy. That was a conspiracy to destroy Native American culture and thus to legitimize the conquest and the massive theft of land. And it carried on into the 20th century with the so-called boarding schools, where Native American children, almost all of them, were taken away from their families,
We've talked about
hundreds of miles away, and put in schools and taught that their culture was rubbish and indoctrinated with Western.
All right, so I'm in this book now. It's called The Sacred Mysteries Among the Mayas and the Quiches, 11,500 years ago. All right? Yes, 11,500 years ago. Their relation to the sacred mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, and India. It says here, Freemasonry in times anterior to the Temple of Solomon. Illustrated by Augustus Le Plongeon. And it says he's an author of a sketch of the ancient inhabitants of Peru and their civilization, vestiges of the Mayas, essay on vestiges of antiquity, essay on the causes of earthquakes, religion of Jesus compared with the teachings of the church, the monuments of Mayaks, and their historical teachings. This book is from 1886. All right? And we're in the preface of the book, and it says here, the forests of Yucatan and Central America are today for the majority of the people of the United States, even those who call themselves scientific and well-informed, as much as terra incognita, meaning it's unknown to them. All right, he's trying to say they don't really know anything about it, and this is during his time, right? As America was to the inhabitants of Europe before its discovery by Cristobal Colon in 1498. When for the first time he came in sight of the northern coast of South America and navigated along it from the mouth of the river Orinoco to Porto Cabello in the Gulf of Triste. If you haven't persuaded the books of J.L. Stevens, Norman, and other tourists who have hurriedly visited the ruins of the ancient cities that lie hidden in the depths of those forests, have a vague idea that there exist the remains of stone houses built sometime or other before the discovery aver authoritatively that their builders were but little removed from the state of savagism, and that none of their handwork is worth the attention of the students of our age. Their civilization, they confidently say, was at best very crude. They were ignorant of art of writing, and the scanty records of their history chronicled on their skins, and pictorial representations are well nigh unintelligible. They had no sciences, no mental culture or intellectual development. They were in fact a race whose intelligence was, for the most part, of lower order. From what they did, nothing is to be learned and that has any direct bearing on the progress of civilization. In no wise can they be compared with the Egyptians or the Chaldees, much less with the Greeks or Romans. It is not, therefore, worth our while to spend time and money and researches among the ruins of their cities. It is to Greece, it is to Egypt, to Chaldea, that Americans must go in order to make new discoveries. In those countries must be established schools for study of Greek or Egyptian or Chaldean archaeology. And American schools have been established at Athens and Alexandria, and expeditions sent to Syria, to the shores of the Euphrates. I was saying when they were going in there was, even though they went in there and found things, and a lot of these probably are Freemasons and stuff, and they kept it to themselves and just said, there's nothing there to find, there's nothing there good. That's what he's saying. But look what he's going to say right now. But the European scientists who for many years past have explored those old fields in order to obtain relics to fill the shelves of the museums of their capitals and turned up the soil of the Orient in search of archaeological treasures, now look to the Western continent in quest of the origin of those ancient civilizations. Where are they looking now? He's letting you know, this is back in the 1800s, right? Because we're going to read Graham Hancock a little bit later, letting us know the same thing. In modern times, they're doing the same thing, right? Because what happened, they couldn't find anything over on their side. So what did they start doing? Now they look to the Western continent in quest of the origin of those ancient civilizations, which they have been unable to find in the countries where they once flourished. They haven't been able to find any of these ancient monuments or things mentioned like in the Bible or anything like that. They haven't been able to find them over there because they're looking at the wrong side. And they look with that reverence which true learning begets on those ancient American temples and palaces that are object of contempt for some modern American scientists. All right, so it says Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. All right, so we got in part 5 or 6 of this series. We read again the preface only, and it was so full of drop, and that's where I left it. And we haven't continued since then. So we talked about the Nagas being actually the Mayas. That's what he was correlating, letting us know. And then we also got like a story of Queen Mu, right, who she was and how she went over to that other side of the world in Egypt. She was from here, and had something to do with the construction of the Sphinx. Talking about a jaguar, we talking about a jaguar, a dog, whatever, man, whatever it was. Definitely the head is fake, the modern head, that whole theme park over there. Either way, the story of somebody going from here over there is the point. Just like Bob said, right, that he came from here and he went over there. Thops and Atlantean, that's over here. So there was again the book by Costas Le Plongeon. Alright, again, we're in the introduction of this book. If you should catch the preface of it, go make sure after this video, if you haven't seen it, go back to those parts. Go back to the beginning, part 1, you'll see, this is the true old world, alright? So let's begin. It says the country known today as Yucatan, one of the states of the Mexican Confederacy, may indeed be justly regarded by the ethnologist, the geologist, and the naturalist, the philologist, the archaeologist, and the historian as the most interesting field of study. Alright? This should be what they're studying, but you know what? They've neglected it this whole time. How are they finding thousands of structures? They're gonna find millions, but they're finding thousands of structures in the jungle today. And they said it's gonna take them 100 years just to study one site, like these 60,000 structures. That's one, certain areas they did their LiDAR scan on. They haven't even done the LiDAR scan on the whole jungle yet. Alright, so they're still going to be finding things. This is the place where all these professionals, right, in their fields, right, PhDs, should be putting their interest in. Alright, he's letting you know right away. Its area of 73,000 square miles, covered with dense forests, is literally strewn with the ruins of numerous antique cities, numerous majestic temples, stately palaces, the work of learned architects. Now heaps of debris crumbling under the inexorable tooth of time and the impious hand of iconoclastic collectors of relics for museums. Alright, he's letting you know. Majestic temples, numerous antique cities. Where's all this stuff in Egypt, right? So ancient, but they always just show us like 3 pyramids. Where's the rest of the city? Where's the courts, the university? You know, like I know this, they're scattered all around and they give us, you know, these explanations, but not like over here. You guys don't understand. These are like metropolises, right? Like real big, giant cities, with majestic temples, stately palaces, the work of learned architects, learned, very wise people, Toltec architects, builders, mound builders, pyramid builders. All right. Now heaps of debris. Now it's all debris, right? They're just collecting things for the museums. He says, among the statues of priests and kings, mutilated and defaced by the actions of the elements, the hand of time and that of man, he prostrated in the dust. Walls covered with bas reliefs, inscriptions, and sculptures carved in marble. All right, carved in marble. Are you hearing all this, right? You got to picture all this in the jungle right here, the Yucatan, Guatemala. You got to know that it's all you this whole time. They've been talking about when he's reading this. I want you to picture yourself, your ancestors, or just, you know, a Naga up in there. All right, an Aboriginal building all this stuff. The different coppers, the different shades of copper, all these different people that live together in these cities, all right, on the kingdoms, majestic palaces, statues of priests and kings of marble, all right, priests and kings, you mean a priest king, a Khan, the Khans, they call themselves the Khans, the Maya, the Khans, the serpents, Khan, priest kings, the Drakons, dragons, the plum serpent, the Amaru. Alright? Now it says, alright, so all these things carved in marble, right? Containing the panegyrics of rulers, the history of the nation, its cosmogonical traditions, the ancient religious rites and observances of its people, inviting decipherment, attract the attention of the traveler. All right, there's so much stories he says there in the inscriptions telling them their history. Situated between 18 degrees and 21 degrees, 35 of latitude north and 86, 50, and 90, and 35 of longitude west from the Greenwich Meridian, Yucatan forms a peninsula that divides the Mexican Gulf from the Caribbean Sea. It's a beautiful place over there. The peninsula then divided into many districts or provinces, each governed by an independent ruler who had given a peculiar title to his own dominions, seems to have had no general name. One district was called Chacan, another Sepeth or Sepesh, another Choaca, another Mayapan, and so on. Mayapan, however, was a very large district. Alright, Mayapan, whose king was regarded as Suzain by the other chieftains. Previous to the destruction of his capital by the people, headed by the nobility, they having become tired of his exactions and pride, this rebellion is said to have taken place 71 years before the advent of the Spanish adventurers in the country. Alright? So they're letting you know there's a whole history. You gotta always think about that. Before these Europeans arrived, there was a whole history already over here. This is the true ancient world, right? So these are the Nagas, alright? We're reading about the Khans, right? They just told us, the Grand Khan, the Nagas, right? Khans are the serpent, right? And in the Hindu tradition, the Nagas, right? Serpent is Ramayas, right? And so they lived and had their own history. They had their own overthrows and kingdoms and, you know, rivalries. There was already things like that going on over here, all right? You gotta think of that. The powerful dynasty of the Cocomes, which had held tyrannical sway over the land for more than 2 centuries, then came to an end. Among the chroniclers and historians, several have ventured to give an etymology of the word Maya. None, however, seem to have known its true origin. Maya. Maya, mama. Alright, so quickly I want to read from this newspaper article that I found. It was from it says here, the Kansas City Journal, from Monday, October the 12th, 1896. And the title is Prehistoric Man, the Human Race and Its Dispersions. How long has the earth been people, and when and where was the beginning? Alright, so we've been doing a lot of research, right? Correlating a lot of things that, America is the true old world. Alright, more and more evidence is just going to keep coming out. We're just going to keep finding all these investigations, studies, articles, documented, recorded, historical chronicles, and information, right, that existed that never was taught to us. All right, so this is one of those. All right, so let's see what they have to say in this article. All right, because we are talking about, a lot of Egyptian resemblances here in America, and the truth is that this is the source, this is their origins, and that's why there is some resemblances here to all the old world civilizations. We have all that here. All right, it's not just like we're similar to Egyptians or we're similar to the Hindu or all that. It's everything, because this is the source. So from here it's spread out to the rest of the world. All right, so let's see what they say right here. All right, so I'm just going to belly flop to this part of the article, and it says, after correlating all data that have been made public to the present time, all right, the conclusion is unavoidable that the oldest civilization was in the Yucatan and Central America. All right, again, the Kansas City Journal in 1896 wrote this. They're telling you that if you really do the research and you start compiling all this information, all this evidence, it's unavoidable, all right, that the oldest civilization was in the Yucatan and Central America. Future discoveries may change this conclusion. It seems that Egypt was first peopled by immigrants from the Yucatan. Say what? It seems that Egypt was first peopled by the immigrants from Yucatan. Space will allow only a few facts that clearly indicate the truth of this assertion. First, the pyramids of Yucatan are some of them much larger than any found in Egypt. All right, much larger than any found in Egypt. That of Cheops not accepted. All right, and Giza. Second, the pyramids of Egypt bear structural evidence of having been modeled on those of Yucatan, notably of the one at Coloma, which covers 23 acres. Third, the early Egyptians and the Mayas of Yucatan had the same system of reckoning time, but the Mayas developed a system that was far superior. Again, we got that in the Foreign Quarterly Review, right? Far superior, or excelled, in which antedates that of Egypt is older than Egypt. All right? Fourth, the Mayas manufactured cement that was of the same material as that of ancient Egypt. Fifth, the architecture of Yucatan is of the same general type as that of an ancient Egypt, but it is finer and seems to have been the model that the Egyptians attempted to imitate. They attempted to imitate our models from here, America. Six, the art of both countries, as displayed in their ceramics and architecture, is of the same type or school, that of Yucatan, being much more highly developed. Alright, again, this was an article written in the Kansas City Journal, Monday, October 12th, 1896, if you want to look it up. Prehistoric Man. They're telling you straight up in this article back in 1896 that we were the source, we were the cradle of civilization, and we went and colonized Egypt over there. Just like Thoth told us in Atlantis, the Emerald Tablets, right? And the green Emerald Tablets, right? He told us he went over there, right? To the sons of Chem. Alright, we got the Masonic book on the last video, right? What did it tell us? That this is the original Egypt. And when we're talking about prehistory, we're talking about America. That's the Masons. That's one of their most sacred books. Ancient Mystic Order. Alright? Foreign Quarterly Review. Vases agreeing both in shape and ornament with the earliest specimens of Egyptian and Etruscan pottery have been found in their sepulchral excavations. Moreover, evidences of an amount of civilization and of social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boosted monuments of Egypt are furnished by the architectural memorials of this great, singular, and almost unknown people. They're talking about you, the aboriginal so-called Negro that was here. And they say that you are unknown, and they say that you disappeared, and they say that you came from Africa. Alright, so again, this guy's just saying, there's evidences of amount of civilization and social comfort which are not to be found among the popular and boasted monuments of Egypt. It just shows basically what he's saying. You're just seeing pyramids, but you're not seeing the whole town, the whole city, the aqueducts. Where's everything else? You can find that in Mexico. They just found 60,000 structures in the jungles of Guatemala. Well, they just released the information to us. Who knows how long ago they know about it? 60,000 structures, right? This was a metropolis. It basically rewriting history. Millions of people lived there. Clean streets, aqueducts, highways, fortified, monuments. All right? Dig into it. Roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them. Like I just said, all these ancient ruins are all connected by roads and highways in the middle of the jungle. That's what they're realizing today, this year. They're letting us know. And this book is from 1836, this article. Why didn't they teach us this in school? Who knows? We might have become archaeologists. We might have had an interest to dig into this stuff, to our own history, knowing that it was greater than Egypt and vast and magnificent and grandeur. We would have probably been the archaeologists discovering and writing about this today. All right, but we weren't given that chance. They told us everything was over there and that side over there. You want to be an archaeologist? You want to study history? You got to go over there to study in Oxford. Then you got to go to Egypt. Then everywhere else but here. All right. Again, roads are to be found not only in the vicinity of their great cities, but at considerable distance from them. Artificially constructed like the Roman military roads of large squared blocks of stone. These roads, on the same principle as the railroad, affect a continued level. They're in fact viaducts, as contrasted with aqueducts, which these people also constructed, where they traverse acclivities. They are parapeted, and the evidences both of regular posting stations at regular intervals and of the regular division of the distances upon the principle of our milestones upon turnpike roads are still to be observed. Bridges constructed of the same durable materials and traversing mountain torrents are also to be found. Where is all this in the so-called old world and the other side in Egypt? Where is all this? High science, high civilization. In these bridges, an approach to the principle of the arch and keystone may be in a few instances discerned, but generally they display the primitive and obvious form of architraves of stone, superimposed on two or more piers of the same massy character and durable materials. Every feature of these structures is at once singular, ingenious, and gigantic. Ingenious and gigantic. Cyclopean in the forms of their masonry, they are characterized throughout by the same titanium character of wild and exaggerated grandeur. This book now is called The Sacred Mysteries Among the Mayas and the Quiches, 11,500 years ago. Their relation to the sacred mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, and India. It says here Freemasonry in times anterior to the Temple of Solomon. Illustrated by Augustus Le Plongeon. Thus we see established in Paris the Société des Americanistes, whose sole object is the study of all things pertaining to ancient American civilization. That society, composed of students, spares no effort to obtain knowledge, respecting the architecture, the science, the arts, the language, and the civilization of the people who inhabited in remote ages the various countries of this western continent. A premium of 25,000 francs has been offered for the discovery of an alphabet or key to the inscriptions carved on the walls of the monuments in Yucatan in Central America. M. Desiree Charnay has been sent to obtain molds of the sculptures and other precious relics that lie hidden and lost in the recesses of the Central American forest. Casts have been made from such squeezes as he obtained. These casts adorn the Trocadero Museum at Paris. Duplicates of the same having been presented to the Smithsonian Institute at Washington by Mr. Pierre Lorillard of New York. This gentleman is the only American who has ever contributed. With his wealth and influence, he has spent $25,000 in expeditions for the recovery of facts and objects that may throw light on the ancient history of America. Then again, we have in Europe the International Congress des Americanistes that convenes every 4 years in one of the capitals of Europe for the purpose of collecting all new data obtained in the interval concerning ancient American civilization. So you see, they have these special societies just for this, so they can know what's coming out of America. In England, at Cambridge, there is in the university a large building specially dedicated to Central American archaeology. Alright? There are to be seen, as I am informed by General Sir Henry Lefroy, the cast and photographs obtained by Mr. Maudsley, a wealthy gentleman who was devoted his time and wealth to the work of obtaining facsimiles in plaster and photographs of the ancient monuments of Honduras and Guatemala. Facsimiles are exact copies of the original. 3 years ago, I had a cast made from some of the stereotype molds made by me of sculpture at Uxmal and offered them for exhibition in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Central Park. They have been placed in the cellar, out of the way, for want of space against the wall. That's what they told him. The public has never seen them. I once remonstrated with one of the trustees and proposed to sell the museum a copy of the collection of fresco paintings from Chichen Itza, last remnants of ancient American art. The answer of the gentleman was no. Those things are not appreciated. They are looked upon as of no value. Nevertheless, some of the illustrations in this book are photographs of the same despised cast and mural paintings. Alright, so he's going to show you what they were saying has no value. During the last lecturing season, I offered to several literary, scientific, and historical societies to give lectures illustrated with views made by us of the monuments and enlarged with the stereopticon. In every instance, I received the same answer. Our people are not interested in such a subject. What? Americans not interested in American antiquities? That's what I'm saying. In ancient American history? In ancient American civilization? Alright, so you see how they were purposely ignoring these people that were going and doing this research and finding these things, right? Not all of them were down with those same Smithsonians and all that, and the museum people and all that. Alright, some of them actually, financed their own expeditions and went there, and they had connections, they're Freemasons and all that, but, they're trying to let them know what's over there. Ms. Le Plongeon and I have written 2 works of Yucatan. One is Monuments of Mayaks and Their Historical Teachings. The other, Yucatan, its ancient palaces and modern cities, life and customs of the aborigines. We have offered them to several publishing houses, but the same answer has been given by all. There is no money in the publication of such books. American readers do not care for this subject. Alright, you hear all this? And it was true, people don't care. And a lot of people right now still don't care. Right? Notwithstanding such rebuffs, I made up my mind to present to American readers some of the historical facts that have been brought to light by deciphering the bas-reliefs and mural inscriptions by means of the ancient hieratic Maya alphabet discovered by me. Alright, and check this out. This is a big one right here. Let me just show you this one. Alright, so you got, on one side it says, on the left, it says Ancient Maya Hieratic alphabet according to mural inscriptions, and to the right is Egyptian hieratic alphabet according to Messrs. Champollion, Lejeune, de Brunsen. All right. So they're talking about, at least the Egyptian ones, they're verified from primary sources that they're using in that time. And this is what he's finding and what they're finding in the Americas on the left. And you can see the resemblances, right? So this little by little. All right, you see. Yeah, so you got this one right here, and then you got the thing right here. Then you got like a little box right here, another box right here. All right. You see this one, then this one as well over here. Basically the same, you see that? Alright, you got this right here. Well, two of them, right? You got similar. Alright, you got this one right here, and so on, right? You can see, well, this one looks like this one, or at least this one, right? And water, that water, the line, look at that. Alright, square, square. Do this. You got a triangle here, and then you got this one and this one. Alright, just backwards. Look at that. Same, kind of like the same. Alright, then you got the lines. Okay. Alright, so yeah, it has a lot of similar. You see the symbols here, the letter that it associates to, supposedly. All right, are we just talking about the ancient pictograph, the ancient Ibarias? All right, who are the Maya? Who are the Nagas? Right, who really civilized who? All right, John showing you right here in this small book, which two of the most prominent firms in New York have positively refused to publish, believing it to be a bad speculation. I present only such facts as can be proved by the works of well-known writers, ancient and modern, and by the inscriptions carved on stone by the Maya learned men and historians. It is for you, reader. It is for you. Talking to you, the reader, right? We're not talking about you believing anybody else. Talking to you personally. You verify the information. You're listening right now. Don't listen to other people, what they're telling you. They're not showing you any sources, right? This is for you, reader, to judge if they are worthy your consideration, all right? So letting you know what's been going on, how he's had trouble, getting this out there, right, to these historians and these museums, and having, this awareness come about, like he wants to spread. He wants to really people to focus on what was here, the civilizations that were here, because it's showing him that it's actually very ancient, right? Alright, so it says Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. Alright, so there was again the book by Augustus Le Plongeon. Alright, again, we're in the introduction of this book. Alright, so it says, let's continue, it says, as a natural consequence of the destruction by the invaders of Chichen Itza, then the seat of learning, the Itza is, preferring ostracism to submitting to their Vandal-like conquerors, abandoned their homes and colleges, and became wanderers in the desert. Alright? Abandoned what? Their homes and what? Colleges. Colleges, plural. And became wanderers in the desert. They became wanderers in the desert. Alright, so again, right, we know this is Canaan, right? We know somebody got kicked out of Canaan. Could it be the same story? I'm just saying, or could it just be a total different story? And this could be like the hijack, right? Coming in and destroying all this stuff. Even before the Europeans got here, getting things ready. Alright? That's what we gotta try to understand. So we're gonna dig on all that. I'm sure how was gonna lead us to the water. It says, then the arts and sciences soon declined. With their degeneracy came that of civilization. Civil war, that inevitable consequence of invasions, political strife, and religious dissension broke out before long and caused the dismemberment of the kingdom that culminated in the sack and burning of the city of Mayapan and the extinction of the royal family of the Cocomes in 1420. Alright, now we're talking about, so he was at 522, now he's at 420. Now this is very close to 1492, right? So look at that. So something had happened in Mayapan. Somebody had come in. There was a civil war, says, political strife, religious dissension, religious, key word, dissension. Alright, in the city of Mayapan, the extinction of the royal family of the Cocomes in 1420. What happened to their descendants? Again, they said they made them wanderers in the desert. What desert? Huh? 270 years after its foundation. 270 years, right? They had that kingdom. In the midst of the social cataclysms that gave the coup de grace to the Maya civilization, the old traditions and lore were forgotten or became disfigured, engrafted with the traditions, superstitions, and fables of the Nahuatls. They assumed the shape of myths. The great men and women of the primitive ages were transformed into the gods of the elements and of the phenomena of nature. Boom! Wow! You see that? They made those real people who had kingdoms before them, right? Their stories kind of like became what? Shapes of myths. And these great men and women of the primitive ages, some ancient people, were what? Transformed into gods, right? So they made Quetzalcoatl the god. Remember, Quetzalcoatl was like Toltec Maya before, it wasn't Aztec at all. So by the time the Aztecs were having, that's already a lot of years gone by. All right, different people. So he's letting you know right here, kind of like what happened. The ancient libraries having disappeared, new books had to be written. They contained those myths, all right? The Toronto and the Dresden MSS, all right? So these codices, right, seem to belong to that epic, all right? So they started creating the myths, right? And everything became like these stories of the ancient people, right? These ancient aboriginal people of America, this part of the world at that time, wherever they were, whatever nation they were doing, living good or living wrong, whatever. I'm just saying, their stories became myths. And during the Aztec and Mexica eras, I guess that when they were writing their codices, it was already like story by then. It wasn't, but that's how they were preserving it, right? They contain, besides some of the old cosmogonical traditions, the tenets and precepts of the new religion that sprang from the blending of the ceremonies of the antique form of worship of the Mayas with the superstitious notions, the sanguinary rites, and the obscene practices of the phallic cult of the Nahuatl. Phallic. What y'all know about that, man? The phallic cult. Alright, so who are these? He's saying Nahuatls. Alright, who came with their sanguinary rites and obscene practices, yo. They made religions, they started worshiping you, they created idols, right? Of these ancient people. Alright? And so the phallic is, that, man, you follow that to the dog, right? And then Thoth, man, you see, you start seeing Thoth all over this, the phallic cult, really. The laws of the land and the vestiges of the science and knowledge of the philosophers of past ages that still lingered among some of the noble families, transmitted as heirlooms by word of mouth from father to son, so they were still living there amongst them. These books were written in new alphabetical letters, and some of the ancient demotic or popular characters that, being known to many of the nobility, remained in usage. With the old orders of priesthood and the students, the knowledge of the hieratic or sacred mode of writing had disappeared. The legends graven on the facade of the temples and palaces, being written in those characters, were no longer understood, except perhaps by a few archaeologists who were sworn to secrecy. The names of the builders, their history, that of the phenomena of nature they had witnessed, the tenets of the religion they had professed, all contained, as we have said, in the inscriptions that covered these antique walls, were as much a mystery to the people as to the multitudes which have since contemplated them with amazement during centuries to the present day. Bishop Landa, speaking of the edifices of Izamal, asserts that the ancient buildings of the Mayas at the time of the arrival of the Spaniards in Yucatan were already heaps of ruins, objects of awe and veneration to the aborigines who lived in their neighborhood. Alright, so even the aborigines that were living there were like, man, what happened here? Because a lot of these places were already in ruins. We're talking about ancient. We're talking about these places are thousands and thousands of years old. These monuments, these pyramids, these megaliths. So even the aborigines in the town, they're like, yo, man, who lived here thousands of years before them? They had lost, he says, the memory of those who built them and of the object for which they had been erected. Alright? Yet before their eyes were their facades covered with sculptures, inscriptions, figures of human beings and of animals in the round and in bas relief in a better state of preservation than they are now, not having then suffered so much injury at the hand of man, for the natives regarded them as their descendants do still, with reverential fear. They were recorded the legends of the past, a dead letter for them as for the learned men of the present age. There also on the interior walls of many apartments were painted in bright colors pictures that would grace the parlors of our mansions, representing the events and the history of certain personages who had flourished at the dawn of the life of their nation. Scenes that had been enacted in former ages were portrayed in very beautiful bas reliefs, but these speaking tableaux were for the majority of the people as much enigmas as they are today. Still, travelers and scientists are not wanting who pretend that these strange buildings were constructed by the same race now inhabiting the peninsula or by their near ancestors. Regardless of Kogojudo's assertion that it is not known who their builders were and that the Indians themselves preserve no traditions of the subject, unmindful likewise of these words of Lizana, that when the Spaniards came to this country, notwithstanding that some of the monuments appeared new, as if they had been built all 20 years, the Indians did not live in them, but used them as temples and sanctuaries, offering in them sacrifices, sometimes of men, women, and children, and that their construction dated back to a very high antiquity. So they were doing all this sacrificing, didn't even know what the building was for, that it wasn't even the same people. The historiographer par excellence of Yucatan, Kogojudo, informs us that in his day, the middle of the 17th century, scarcely a little more than 100 years after the conquest, the memory of these adulterated traditions was already fading from the mind of the aborigines, of the people who first settled in this kingdom of Yucatan. You guys were already starting to forget your ancestors, the aborigines there, alright? He says, nor of their ancient history, forgot of your ancient history. Have I been able to find any more data than those I mentioned here? The books and other writings of the chroniclers and historians from the Spanish conquest to our times should therefore be considered well nigh valueless, so far as the history of the primitive inhabitants of the country, the events that transpired in remote ages, and ancient traditions in general are concerned. Seeing the Kogojudo says they were unable to procure any information on the subject. It seems to me that it is time, he says, to speak of the various things pertaining to this country and of its natives, not, however, with the extension some might desire, mentioning in detail their origin and the countries whence they may have come, for it would be difficult for me to ascertain now that which so many learned men were unable to find out at the beginning of the conquest, even inquiring with great diligence, as they affirm, particularly since there exists no longer any papers or traditions among the Indians concerning the first settlers from whom they are descended. Our evangelical ministers who imported the faith in order to radically extirpate idolatry, having burned all characters and paintings they could get hold of, in which were written their histories, and that in order to take from them all remembrances of their ancient rites. You see what they were doing, and that's why you couldn't remember too good, right? And it was probably they didn't want you to practice that or, even remember. Those who undertook to write the narrative of the conquest in the history of the country in order to procure the necessary data for this had naturally to interrogate the natives, all right? These were either unable or unwilling to impart the knowledge sought. It may be that some of those from whom inquiries were made were descendants of the Nahuals, ignorant of the ancient history of the Mayas, you see? So they would interview like somebody who just got there recently. They, they say that Moctezuma says people came from somewhere else, right? They just got there like in the 1420s, just like in the time that it tells you these people were kind of overthrown in Mayapan and something happened there. So they talk about, they ask anybody like that, hey, what's the ancient history? Like, I don't know, because they're not the ones that were there anciently, right? The Mayas were there more anciently. Alright. Others may have been some of the Mexican mercenaries who dwelt on the coast, where they were barely tolerated by other inhabitants because of their sanguinary practices. They from the first had welcomed the Spaniards as friends and allies, had maintained with them intimate relations during several years. You see, so these people, to call these mercenaries, Mexican mercenaries, these people who were not Mayas, alright, or Nahuals, but they were some other clan or people. They lived on the shores because everybody would push them up away from their homes or towns or whatever. And as soon as the Spanish got there, they were like, word, man, because they were evil. They were doing sanguinary practices and they were living on their own. They were like rebels, right? Well, so they made allies and friends with the Spaniards, and they told them where to go get the people, right? Had maintained with them intimate relations during several years before the invaders ventured into the interior of the country. So they already were plotting with them. They were living with them for mad years before they even were able to get into the middle. They were, plotting, getting ready, fearing that if they pleaded ignorance of the history, it might be ascribed to unwillingness on their part to answer the questions. Dreading also to alienate the goodwill of the men with long gowns who defended them against the others that handled the thunderbolts. Oh, so the Mayas or somebody that these people were hiding from, that were helping the Spaniards, saying that I'd rather defend, I'd rather help these the robe men, right? These priests, these Spaniards, these Europeans, than the other people who got thunderbolts. They're talking about you had thunderbolts. Right, that's what they were saying. Those strangers covered with iron, now masters of the country and of their persons, who on the slightest provocation subjected them to such terrible punishments and atrocious torments, that recited the nursery tales with which their mothers had lulled them to sleep in the days of their childhood. These stories were sent down as undoubted traditions of olden times. Later on, when the conquest was achieved, some of the natives who really possessed the knowledge of the myths, traditions, and facts of history contained in the books that those same men with long gowns had willfully destroyed by feeding the flames with them, notwithstanding the earnest protestations of the owners, invented plausible tales when questioned and narrated these as facts. Unwilling as they were to tell the truth to foreigners who had come to their country, uninvited, arms in hand, carrying war and desolation wherever they went. They came on slave raids, right? It wasn't expeditions. Slaughtering the men, all right? Slaughtering. This is Deuteronomy 28 right here. Outraging the wives and the virgins, destroying their homes, their farms, their cities, spreading ruin and devastation throughout the land, all right? Desecrating the temples of their gods, trampling underfoot the sacred images, the venerated symbols of the religion of their forefathers, imposing upon them strange idols. They came with strange idols that they said were likeness of the only true God, Jesus, and his mother, Mary, an assertion that seemed most absurd to those worshippers of the sun, moon, and other celestial bodies who regarded Ku, the divine essence, the uncreated soul of the world, as the only supreme God, not to be represented under any shape. Oh, they told him, we don't need an idol for our God. You shouldn't represent anything under any shape. For Ku, the spirit, the Ruach, the great spirit, Ku, Ruach, the Ku, the divine essence, the soul of the world, the supreme God, alright? Yet by lashes, torture, death, even the victims were compelled to pay homage to these images with rites and ceremonies, alright? They were compelled. You have to worship Jesus, you have to marry and all of them. You have to pray the rosary and do this and do that. Alright, with rites and ceremonies, the purport of which they were, as their descendants still are unable to understand. Being at the same time forbidden to observe the religious practices which they had been accustomed to from times immemorial. Alright, they brought you a different tune. Forget it. You had a good tune, then they brought you a different one. More, their temples of learning were destroyed, with their libraries and their precious volumes. Your libraries and temples, alright? Libraries, colleges, remember, and their precious volumes that contain the history of their nation, that of their illustrious men and women whose memory they venerated, the sciences of their wise men and philosophers. Alright, the science and everything they had. How then could it be expected that they should tell what they knew of the history of their people, and treat as friends men who them hated, and with reason, from their heart of hearts, men who held their gods in contempt, men who had without provocation destroyed the autonomy of their nation, broken up their families, reduced their king to slavery? Alright, reduce what? Who? Aboriginals to what? To slavery. Who? The Spanish? Didn't we just go over this? They reduced them to slavery, brought misery upon them, gloom and mourning throughout the land. Alright, Deuteronomy 28. Alright, so real quick, I just wanted to get into this, this, mythology, they call it, or history of the Mayas, right? And it says the sea turtle in the Mayas, alright? Posted by Jose Diaz, December 10, 2019, Mayan culture. Right? This is an image here. As the Mayas found in nature a unique source of inspiration that allowed them to understand everything around them. For them, there were no difference between animals and plants. They all belonged to the same plane. And even some of these animals were personifications or reincarnations of divine energies. Among all these animals, we can count the jaguar, the snake, and the turtle. Alright? The turtle is one that had a fundamental role as the origin of life for this culture, right? Origin of life, turtle. Alright, now look at this symbol right here. Alright, this is a Mayan glyph. This is an old one. This is obviously painted, but you see some aboriginals there. So this is Hunampu. Alright, the Maya maize god. He was born, he came out of the shell of the turtle. And the turtle represents the earth and the water below it, the plains. Alright, this is the underworld under it. Alright, and he's like a maize and the sprout in him. Alright, and this is basically what in Egypt would be like almost the same as Osiris, because Osiris was a corn deity and it was the same thing. Alright, so it's glad you like to know that. It says, although the records of the relationship between the Mayans and the sea turtle are few, we can still find them in different manifestations of them in different cases. In the ancient world, it had a special symbolism as a representation of the earth, alright? Representation of the earth, Turtle Island, par excellence for its stability, excellent for stability, as well as its close relationship with water. Remember that, water, wata, ma, the mem, wata, and constellations. The sea turtle was not only important within the Mayan cosmogony, but also for other cultures in Mesoamerica that related its shell to the celestial vault. Its shell to the celestial vault, they're talking about the firmament, the shell, the top of it, and the animal's body was the axis that united both heaven and earth. Alright. Among the vestiges of the great Maya cities, we also find representation of this fantastic animal in Uxmal with the House of Turtles, which is located near Governor's Palace or in Chichen Itza in the building known as the church. Alright, here we go. So it says Uxmal, right? The Temple of the Turtles. Alright, look at that. Temple of the Turtles. And then it says here in the Handbook Live of Ancient Maya World, right? We're looking at this symbol again. Let me just zoom in. It says here that this symbol, right, we just saw, it says Codex style polychrome plate, late classic period. A finely painted scene on the interior of this plate depicts Hunampu emerging from the turtle carapace. Alright, he's emerging from the turtle. Alright, the hero twins Hunampu and Shabalanque appear on each side of their father. Shabalanque assists in the resurrection of their father as Maiz by pouring water on the sprouting corn. Alright. Over towards this side it says the Maiz god emerges from the underworld through the crack in a turtle carapace. Alright? Turtle. Then right here it says The Ancient Maya New Perspective by Heather Irene McKilcock. And it says here that one theme shows a scene of hero twins with their father as he emerges from the carapace of a turtle, metaphorically. This image refers to the emergence of the Maiz god from Xibalba, as the turtle symbolized the earth floating on the sea. Alright? The turtle island, the turtle symbolized the earth floating on the sea, which is the underworld. The rebirth of Hunampu, Ampu, as the Maiz god symbolized the renewal of life and sowing of corn on earth. Alright, just like Osiris, and again the turtle symbolized the earth floating on the sea. Turtle Island, you see where they get these legends are all similar. Even in North America, right? It's called North America Turtle Island. So we're gonna see. I was showing this for a reason, so we can see later. They're gonna Augustus Le Plongeon in his books. He's gonna try to explain some of the hieroglyphics, some Maya hieroglyphics, and it relates to this, the word Mayak or Mayak. What is the meaning behind it? All right, and it has a lot to do with what we're just here reading right now. So it's crazy. So let's get into it. Indiana Jones. All right, so it says Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. All right, so there was again the book by Augustus Le Plongeon. All right, again we're in the introduction of this book. Maya was the name of a powerful nation that in remote ages dwelled in the peninsula of Yucatan, in the countries today called Central America, comprised between the isthmus of Tehuantepec on the north and that of Darien on the south. So that would be from Mexico all the way to Panama. All right, that's the Maya Empire right there. So that includes all of Central America. That name was as well known among the ancient civilized nations the world over as at present are the names of Spain, France, England. All right, he's saying Maya. The whole world knew that. All the ancient civilized nations of the world knew that Maya, that kingdom, that place was here. As from these countries, colonists abandoning the land of their birth have gone and still go forth in search of new homes in far distant regions, have carried and do carry with the customs, manners, religion, civilization, and languages of their forefathers, the name even of the mother country, to their new abodes. So we may imagine it happened with the Mayas at some remote period in the past. For it is a fact that wherever we find their name, there also we meet with the vestiges of their language and customs and many of their traditions, but nowhere except in Yucatan is the origin of their name to be found. Among the various authors who have written on that country, several have endeavored to give the etymology of the word Maya. None has succeeded, for instead of consulting the Maya books that escaped destruction at the hands of the Sumarragas, the Landas, and the Torquemadas, they have appealed to their imagination, as if in their fancy they could find the motives that prompted the primitive inhabitant to apply such or such name to this or that locality. Ramon de Ordóñez y Aguilar fancied that the name Maya was given to the peninsula on account of the scarcity of water for its surface, and intimated intimated that it was derived from the two vocables ma, no, and ha, water, ha, that water, that ha, ha, without water. Brasseur, following his own pet idea, combats such explanation as incorrect and says the country is far from being devoid of water. Its soil is honeycombed and innumerable caves exist just under the surface. And these caves are deposits of cool, limpid water, extensive lakes fed by subterranean streams, alright? That's right there. Hence, he argues that the true etymology of the word Maya may possibly be the mother of the waters. Mother of the waters. You hear this? Maya. Or the teats of the waters. Maya. Maya. The teats of the water. She of the 400 breasts. The breast. As they were wont to represent the Ephesian goddess. You see that? That's where they get this from Maya. From here. Blanda, Cogoyudo, Lisana, all accord in stating that the land was called Umilse, the land of the deer. Herrera again says it was called Beb, a very thorny tree, and the great serpent Khan. But we in the Toronto manuscript that this was the name of the whole of the Maya Empire. The whole, the whole of the Maya Empire, not the peninsula alone. The discovery of a fragment of mural painting in the month of February 1882 on the walls of an apartment in one of the edifices at Kaba caused me to devote many months to study the Maya text of that interesting old document. It was with considerable surprise that I then discovered that several pages at the beginning of the second part are dedicated to the recital of the awful phenomena that took place during the cataclysm that caused the submersion of 10 countries, among which the land of Mu, that large island probably called Atlantis by Plato, and the formation of the strangely crooked line of islands known to us as the West Indies, but as the land of the scorpion to the Mayas, the land of the scorpion. Alright, the West Indies. But he's talking about there was a cataclysm in this text he was studying of 10 countries. Alright? Amongst which was the land of Mu. Alright? And then the formation of the West Indies. I was no less astonished and gratified to find an account of the events and the life of the personages whose portraits, busts, and statues I had discovered among the ruins of the edifices raised by them at Chichen and Uxmal, whose history portrayed in the mural paintings is also recounted in the legends and the sculptures still adorning the walls of their palaces and temples, and to learn that these ancient personages had already been converted at the time the author of the Toronto manuscript wrote his book. They already had been converted. Not changed or taken out, converted. They were still there. They just had been converted, alright, by these other tribes that invaded them. It says at the time the author of the Toronto manuscript wrote his book into the gods of the elements and made the agents who produced the terrible earthquakes that shook part of the lands of the West. Whoa. To their very foundations, as told in the narrative of the Akab Ebes, and finally caused them to be engulfed by the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. Alright, what happened? So it says they wrote his book into the gods of the elements and made the agents who produced the terrible earthquakes. It was man-made. What's going on? This sounds like Atlantis, right? There was in a Plato's story talking about they did something wrong there. They caused themselves a cataclysm. The author of the Toronto manuscript gives in his work the adjoining map, Plate 2, of the land of the Beb, mulberry tree, the Maya Empire. In it, he indicates the localities which were submerged and those that still remain above water in that part of the world after the cataclysm. Wow. So check that out, follow up on that, the Toronto manuscript. Actually, we're going to dig on that. Alright. In the legend explanatory of his object and drawing that charts, as in many other places in his book, he gives the serpent head Khan, south, a symbol of the southern continent. He represents the northern by his monogram. Alright, look at that. Looks like an X, right? That reads Ak, turtle. turtle of the North Turtle Island, North America, Turtle Island, turtle. By this sign, alright, placed between the two others, he intends to convey to the mind of his readers that the submerged places to which he refers are situated between the two western continents, are bathed by the waters of the Mexican Gulf, and more particularly by those of the Caribbean Sea, figured by the image of an animal resembling a deer placed over the legend. It is well to remark that this animal is typical of the submerged Antillean valleys, alright, Antillean valleys, as it will plainly appear further on. Alright, he's gonna break this all down, what he's talking about. I know it sounds crazy, alright, but this is very interesting. It just sounds just like Atlantis and the cataclysm and all that. Wow. Alright, so this is one of the glyphs. Alright, see if we can back up a little bit. Alright, so he's saying this is telling a story, right?
Alright, so again, I just wanted you to understand what they're trying to say, or what they're about to get into too. So they're talking about that this glyph right here kind of like symbolizes maybe the lands and what parts are submerged. Alright, so this deer right here they were talking about, you're going to see what they're going to talk about, what the Mayas, when they put it in certain codices or whatever, papyruses, right? They were actually talking about, well, he's going to tell you the Caribbean, all right? So let's get into it a little bit more, all right? So it says the lines lightly etched here are painted blue in the original. As in our topographical maps, the edges of the water courses of the sea and lakes are painted blue, all right? So they're saying that, with colors, you can see the shores of the ocean, all right, in that glyph, all right, that we just saw. So the Maya hierogrammatist figured the shores of the Mexican Gulf, indicated by the serpent head. The three signs of locality placed in the center of said gulf mark the site of the extinguished volcano known today as the Alacranes Reefs. Alright? They're telling you specific locations on this map of this hieroglyph that the Mayas made. The serpent head was, for the Maya writers, typical of the sea, whose billows they compared to the undulations of a serpent in motion. They therefore called the ocean Kana, a word whose radical is Kan, Kana, Kanan, Kana, serpent, the meaning of which is the mighty serpent, the Khans. The lines of the drawing more strongly edged, the end of which corresponds to the sign, are painted red, the color of clay, Kan, Kap, and indicate the localities that were submerged and turned into marshes. Alright, so wherever this glyph is, they're saying, is in red, and it shows all the land that got sunk, submerged. Alright, so it's like a map. This complex sign is formed of the emblem of countries near or in the water, and of the cross, made of dotted lines, symbol of the cracks and crevices made on the surface of the earth by the escaping gases, represented by the dots. Alright, you hear that? Cracks made by escaping gases. Wow, they had all that in that image, right? And of a small circle, images of volcanoes. As to the character, this one right here, it is composed of two letters. So we got this one, equivalent to Maya and Greek letter A. You hear that? It's the same as the Greeks. Where do they get their alphabet from? Alright, you see that? Equivalent to the Maya and Greek letter A, same symbol. So entwined as to form the character equal to the Greek and Maya K, but forming a monogram that reads Ak, the Maya word for turtle, Turtle Island, turtle. Before proceeding with the etymology of the name Mayak, it may not be a mist. Alright, so check it out. Alright, so we got Maya and Ak, Mayak. So Wow, the waters and the turtle that came out of it. Waters, the turtle. Wow. And I think I know what they're trying to say here. I mean, I know that my brother Anu told me about, how the whole point of the turtle island, how it just came out, right? The shells floating on the oceans, or the first land out of the water, right? Turtle island. And I'm almost interpreting what he's saying, Agostos Le Plongeon, in this book of the Maya, right? He's trying to translate it. We got the word earlier, Maya was like waters, had something to do with waters, right? Waters. And then Mayak. We're gonna see that's what they were calling this land, Mayak. All right, so then we got turtle and waters, or the turtle that came out the waters, the first land. I don't know. Let's just go with it. It says, it may not be amiss to explain the legends and the other drawings of the tableau. It will be noticed that the characters over that part of the drawing, which looks like the horizontal branch of a tree, are identical with those placed vertically against the trunk, but in an inverted position. It is, in fact, the same legend, repeated and so written for the better understanding of the map and of the exact position of the various localities, that of the Mexican Gulf figured on the left, and of the ideographic or pictorial representation of the Caribbean Sea to the right of the tableau. All right, here what he's breaking down. In order to thoroughly comprehend the idea of the Maya author, it is indispensable to have a perfect knowledge of the contours of the seas and lands mentioned by him in this instance, even as they exist today. Of course, some slight changes since the epoch referred to by him have naturally taken place, and the outlines of the shores are somewhat altered, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, as can be ascertained by consulting maps made by the Spaniards at the time of the conquest. Oh, you hear that? It was a little different, right? The shores of the Gulf of Mexico during the time of the Spaniards in their maps. The adjoining map of Central America, the Antilles, and the Gulf of Mexico being copied from that published by the Bureau of Hydrography at Washington, may be regarded as accurate. This is plate 3. I will take a look at that. Alright, so this is plate 3 where he's talking about. This is like what? Let's see if we can flip this a little bit. I'm gonna flip it to the way that you can actually recognize it. Alright, here we go. So I flipped it so you can see. Alright, so Florida, right? Southeastern US, Texas over here, Mexico, right? We got Central America. Alright, we got Central America. And then you got the Caribbean, right? So now he's trying to say, he's gonna show you, but just pay attention. Look at this, like an animal right here on the white part, and then like appears like the antlers or antennas, right? Antlers. Alright, so that's what they're trying to call the deer in the Mayan hieroglyph, right? So that's what they represent in the Caribbean. Alright, so that's the plate 3 he was talking about, right? Central America, Gulf Antilles. Now it says, on it I have traced in dotted lines figures that will enable anyone to easily understand why the Maya author symbolized the Caribbean Sea as a deer, and the empire of Mayak as a tree rooted in the southern continent and having a single branch, horizontal and pointing to the right, that is, in an easterly direction. Alright? A glance at the map of the drowned valleys of the Antillean lands. This is on plate 4, published by Professor J.W. Spencer of Washington in the Bulletin of Geological Society of America for January 1895, which is reproduced here with the author's permission, must convince anyone that the ancient Maya geologists and geographers were not far behind their brother professors in these sciences of modern times, in their knowledge at least of those. Alright, so that was plate 3 again. So let's go, hopefully we can see plate 4. I got plate 4. Let's back up. Alright, look at the animal body right here, and the antlers on the top, right? So he was showing, just like how the Mayas are drawing a deer, right? This means almost the same. All right, so I got it on the right side so we can, get orientation. So then we got the Caribbean Sea here, right? Sea of Honduras, look at that. And then the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so look, this is just like, it's not like an ocean, it's just like where the land submerged, right? So we have like little deposits. So this would have been, if the land was a little lower, it would have been like more like lakes or rivers, right? And then, so he's saying drowned valleys of the Atlantean lands, the drowned valleys. You see all that? This was almost so connected. Cuba and the Yucatan was like right next to each other. They got Florida right here. So all this is supposedly underwater. These dotted lines is probably a lot more. Alright. So they're not trying to connect Florida to all these, but it most likely was. These were like rivers actually, right? Alright, so either way, the antlers and the body, right? That's what he's saying, the deer. That's why the Mayas painted the deer. That's what he's saying. Alright, so let's get back to the text. Alright, so he was saying that the Maya, they shared the same, had the same exact map as the modern geologists and geographers. They were not far behind their brother professors in the sciences of modern times in their knowledge, at least of those parts of the earth they inhabited and of the adjoining countries. The sign that most attracts the attention is this glyph says, that Bishop Landa says must be read Jack's King, and was that of the 7th month of the Maya calendar. Literally, these words mean the vigorous sun. If, however, we interpret the symbol phonetically, it gives us the country of the king, which is surrounded by water. The Grand Khan, what king? The kingdom in the midst of water, or the kingdom in the midst of water. Alright, talking about Atlantis, we're talking about an island, what are you talking about, kingdom? Alright, you hear what they're interpreting, right? It will also be noticed that it is placed at the top of the tree, to indicate that the tree is the kingdom. Next to it, on the left, is the name Mayak, turtle, which indicates that it is the kingdom of Mayak. The kingdom of the turtle over the waters. Oh wow. Which will become explained by the analysis of the symbols. To begin with, is a wing or a feather. Alright? Look at this. Insignia worn by kings and warriors. Placed here, it has a double meaning. It denotes the north, as we will see later on, and also shows that the land is that of the king whose emblem it is. Alright, this land belongs to a king. The character stands for Ahau. Alright, for the word king. Alright, so now all you guys know why my name is Kurimeo Ahau, where I got it from. Alright, it's a Maya word. Alright, it does mean king, it means a couple other things as well, but mainly, yeah, king. Alright, Kurimeo Ahau. Ahau, ahawa, ahahu, awa, ahawa. Because the AU is wa, awa, awa. Alright? The word for king. Alright, and we have already seen that this symbol right here, Ulumil, is the symbol for land near, in, or surrounded by water, as the empire of Mayak. I remember ATL, Atalan, what basically means the same thing almost. Atlantis, surrounded by water. As the empire of Mayak, the peninsula of Yucatan in Central America are certainly surrounded by water. Alright? On the north by the Gulf of Mexico, on the east by the Caribbean Sea, and on the west and south by the Pacific Ocean. Alright? The symbol then reads Lumil Ahau, the king's country, the kingdom. The kingdom, that's where the kingdom is, you see? They were telling you they had a map, the Mayas. But how do you make your rendering accord with the meaning given to the character by Bishop Landa? I fancy I hear our learned Americanists asking, and I answer in a very simple manner. knowing as I do the genius of the Maya people and their language. The ancient armorial escutcheon of the country still exists on the western facade of the sanctuary at Uxmal. Alright, this is an archaeological site. And in the bas reliefs carved on the memorial monuments of Prince Ko at Chichen. Prince Ko, we got a little bit of his story. Alright, on parts 5 and 6. And that was Queen Mu's brother, I believe. Alright, that was his big brother. She was the little sister. That's why Isis or Isis means little sister. That's what they were saying to us, right? Le gosses le plujon, right? So get that if you haven't seen that. Now it says the emblem represented on said escutcheon scarcely needs explanation. It is easily read, Ulumil King, the land of the sun. Wow, look at that. The kings of Mayak, like those of Egypt, Chaldea, India, China, Peru, etc., took upon themselves the title of children of the sun. Alright, well, yeah, you know, this is a true old world, so see how they all had the same thing, right? Just like the kings of Mayak. And in boost in spirit, that of the strong, the vigorous sun. It says king is the Maya word for sun. But king is also the title of the high priest of the sun. As in Egypt and many other civilized countries, so in Mayak, the king was at the same time chief of the state and of the religion, as in our times the queen in England, the Tsar in Russia, the Sultan in Turkey, etc. Says the title Yak's king may therefore have been applied among the Mayas to the king and to the kingdom. Alright? And my rendering of the symbol does not conflict with that of Landa. In the table, the Maya Empire is portrayed by the beb, alright? A tree with the trunk full of thorns. The trunk is the image of the chain of mountains that traverse the whole country from north to south. There dwell the masters of the earth, the volcanoes, it says. They gave it life, power, and strength. This chain is, as it were, its backbone. It terminates at the Isthmus of Darien, that's down in Panama. So we have, I mean, Costa Rica's full of, you know, that has eight, I think eight, like, that are awake, 8 or 7 right now. But it's had a lot more, and they're all dead, or asleep. But you know, this whole Central America is what he's saying. It's a whole chain of volcanoes. Alright, and what does it do? It gives life, power, and strength. It creates. You know, volcanoes create islands, right? Alright. So who was the first land out of the water? Where's the turtle? So it's his backbone. So it terminates in Darien to the south. This is why the tree is planted in the character Khan, that Landa tells us was the name for south anciently. Alright. At the north, the branch of the tree extends eastward, that is, to the right of the trunk. This branch, the peninsula of Yucatan, is represented by this symbol, which, with but a slight difference in the drawing, is the same as that placed in the vertical legend in an inverted position against the trunk of the tree, by which the author has designated the whole country, calling it Mayak, the land of the chute, the land of the Veretrum, from the name of the peninsula that seems to have been the seat of the government of the Maya Empire. Alright, continuing, it says the motive for the slight change in the drawing is easily explained. The peninsula jutting out in the sea from the mainland as a shoot, a branch from the trunk of the tree, is indicated by the representation of Jak, a Vede Trum, the base of which rests on the sign of land, Ma, right, land, Ma, Yak, Ma, Yak, Vede, or also of shoot, projecting beyond 2 imiks, symbols of 2 basins of water, that is, of the Mexican Gulf and the Caribbean Sea, that are on each side of it. The whole hieroglyph name of the peninsula reads, therefore, Mayak, the place of the ancestors, Veretrum, or the shoot of the tree, the place of the ancestors. Alright? These 2 imiks differ somewhat in shape. The imix is meant to designate the Caribbean Sea, the eastern part of which being opened to the waves of the ocean is indicated by the wavy line, emblem of water. In this instance, it may also denote the mountains in the islands that close it, as it were, toward the rising sun. The other imix stands for the Gulf of Mexico, a Mediterranean Sea, completely landlocked, a Mediterranean Sea, the real one, with a small entrance formed by the peninsula of Florida and that of Yucatan, and commanded by the island of Cuba. So you see, he's breaking down the glyph that shows the whole Caribbean Sea in Mexico and the lands of the Maya, and he's letting you know that the Gulf of Mexico was actually like a landlocked sea, like the Mediterranean. Alright? It wasn't like a big ocean connected to the rest of the ocean. So there was like what I was showing you earlier, it was like little rivers and little lakes, huge lakes, right? Alright, so landlocked in the peninsula of Florida and Yucatan, commanded by the islands of Cuba. It is well to notice that, as has been already said, some of the signs in the horizontal legend are the same as those in the vertical legend, but placed in an inverse position with regard to one another. This is as it should naturally be. Of course, the particular names of the various localities in the country are somewhat different, and the signs indicating their position with reference to the cardinal points are not the same. The symbol IMIX, for instance, of the Mexican Gulf is placed in the vertical legend to the left, that is to the west, of the image of the Caribbean Sea, as it should certainly be. If we look at the map of Central America from the south, when it is apparent that the Gulf of Mexico lies to the westward of the Caribbean Sea, on the other hand, if we enter the country from the north, the Gulf of Mexico will be to the right, and the Caribbean Sea to the left of the traveler, just as the Maya hieroglyphs placed them in the horizontal legend. To return to character, in which the foot of the tree is planted, Khan not only means south, as we have just seen, but it has many other acceptations, all conveying the idea of might and power. Khan, American, Khan. It is a variation of Khan, C-A-N, serpent, the Khans. The serpent with inflated breast, suggested by the contour of the Maya Empire, was adopted as a symbol of the same. Its name began that of the dynasty of the Maya rulers and their totem. We see it sculptured on the walls of the temples and palaces raised by them. In Mayak, in Egypt, in China, in India, and Peru, and many other places, like the image of the serpent was the badge of royalty. The Khans, priest king, royalty, the Nagas. It formed part of the headdress of the kings. It was embroidered on their royal garments. Khan, there we go, with H-K-H-A-N, Khan, is still the title of the kings of Tartary, which were the original kings of Tartary. We're just talking about Prester John. Just talking about, or we talking about King David? What are we talking about? Somebody over here, a cacique over here. In ancient times in America, the Grand Khan, Grand Canyon, what? So that's still a title to it, right? And Burman, etc. That of the governors of provinces in Afghanistan, Persia, and other countries in Central Asia. Alright, now it says this symbol, that the tree was also meant by the author of the Toronto manuscript as a symbol of the Maya Empire. There can be no doubt. He himself takes pains to inform us that the fact Beb Uakal, the Beb was sprung up between Uk U Limilo, the 7 countries of Khan, 7 caves, the 7 countries, 7 cities of gold, 7 countries of Khan, of the Americans, Amurkans. The sign, alright, is painted red in the original to indicate the arable land, Kankab. And then was the symbol of land, the symbol right here, country among the Mayas, as with the Egyptians, but the former used it also as numerical for 5, to which in this case must be added the 2 units. So we have 7 fertile lands. 7 fertile lands The 7 cities of gold. Cibola, what are we talking about here? 7 caves. Aslan, Tulan. The 4 black dots are the numerical 4 and another ideographic sign for the name of the country. Khan, serpent. This is why it is placed at the foot of the tree like the sign at the top to signify that it is the kingdom. The kingdom. They are juxtaposed to the character. Alright, that's the Khan, right? Khan, see? Khan. Also, to denote its geographical position, it will be noticed that this sign was omitted in the horizontal legend, as it should be, since Khan is the word for south, but it has been replaced by X, north, which sign has been incorporated with the sign Beb, thus to show that this is the northern part of the tree that is of the country. There remains to be explained what may be considered in the present instance the most important character of the tableau, since it is the original name given in the most remote ages to that part of the Maya Empire, known on our maps as the Peninsula of Yucatan. Alright, the Yucatan. We know Eber had a son named Joktan, and you can even spell it like this, Joktan, the brother of Peleg. Peleg in the days of Peleg was when the earth was divided. Remember they told us? So we're talking about a cataclysm, we're talking about the waters going up. I mean, seems like we're talking about the same things here. He just said how the earth split and the gases came up. It was represented in this Maya glyph. Alright, so it says, it reads, so they're talking about this glyph, right? It reads, Mayak, the land just sprung. The land just sprung? The primitive land. The primitive land. The hard land. We're talking about turtle, right? Mayak, ak, turtle. Remember? Land, ma, and the y, the waters. Turtle. The primitive land. Remember what's his name? Louis Agassiz told us that America is the true old world and the oldest land that came out of the primordial waters. The symbol itself is an ideographic representation of the peninsula and its surroundings, as will be shown. The reason that caused it to be adopted by the learned men of Mayak as symbol for the name of their country is indeed most interesting. It clearly explains its etymology and also gives us a knowledge of the scope of their scientific attainments. Among these, their perfect understanding of the forces that produced the submersion of many lands and the upheaval of the peninsula and other places, a thorough acquaintance with the geography of the continent wherein they dwelt, and of the lands adjacent in the ocean, that even of the ill-fated island mentioned by Plato's is destruction by earthquakes, and the sad doom of its inhabitants that remain an historical fact. It's a historical fact. We're talking about Atlantis, preserved in the annals, treasured in the Egyptian temples, as well as in those of the Mayas, alright? The Egyptians, the Mayas had this history, had this story saying, all the ancient civilizations had this, right? About a cataclysm, lands going under, a flood, right? So he's letting you know this is a historical fact. Just like Ignatius Donnelly is telling us in Atlantis, the antediluvian world, right? He used all these sources. This person right here, you see how he has all these numbers? These are sources you can go verify. They're also actually almost all of them are scholarly sources they use in history in college and everything. Same thing. So now he's being rational with his, he's coming up with these, he's interpreting this, and you'll understand why. Because he'll tell you straight up that he was able to start reading the Maya glyphs because he knew this old-style Egyptian writing glyphs system. He knew this very old ancient Egyptian, and he was able to use that same knowledge to come read the glyphs over here. Alright, so he's breaking all these things down, but you can see he's using other sources, right? He's using a lot of sources for his theories, which coincide with what he's saying. That's how you do these scholarly things. You gotta be able to verify the information, alright? Either way, you go take your knowledge of whatever you know and apply it to what we're learning with this, right? With this guy, Augustus, Now, again, the Egyptians and the Mayas had these stories. he's letting us know. It says, may we not assume that the identity of traditions indicates that at some epoch, more or less remote, intimate relations and communications must have existed between the inhabitants of the valley of the Nile and the peoples dwelling in the lands of the West. Question mark, lands of the West. You gotta understand, when you go all over Egyptian stories and the Book of the Dead and all that, the ancient, they always talk about the lands of the West, or the underworld, or the Amenti, all that, lands of the West, or that the ancient ancestors came from the lands of the West, all of them, in their own writings. We shall begin. All right. So I just wanted to take a break from those other two books and Augustus Lipler Jones, and I want to get into this book now. I know we were talking about Central American stuff, as being the cradle and everything, and the remnants of an old world, a real old world. So I found this good book. It was really good. All the info in it. I mean, I'm gonna try to get into as much as I can, but at least correlate with what we're reading to right now, at least, and read some of this book. So it's called Mysteries of Ancient South America by Harold T. Wilkins. All right. And this was written, let me see, in 1946 and reprinted in 1947. Alright, so I want to belly flop to this part of the book because we're talking about a land coming out of the waters. We're talking about cataclysms, right? And creation and all this stuff, and earths being separated, alright, land being submerged. Alright, sounds like a lot of the stories we hear about Atlantis, right, and the Greeks. Alright, so in this book, even though we're going to talk about South America, is going to relate to what we're talking about. It says Aelianus Claudius, the Roman rhetor, who died AD 410, cites a very curious story about conditions in Atlantis prior to the Great Cataclysm. It is taken from a vanished book of the great Greek historian Theopompus, who flourished at Chios in 354 BC. Only a few fragments of the histories of Theopompus have survived, and in one of them there is a very curious talk between a certain Silenus and Midas. I give my own translation from the Latin. It says here, now this is a translation from 354 BC, according to this guy from Theopompus, the Greek dude, alright? Now it says, and he said, in those times, Europe and Asia and Libya, which is Africa, right? Those three continents, islands are girdled by the ocean. Beyond them are continents of infinite size. There's more continents. He knew that in 354 BC, of infinite size, big, which support great animals. All the animals. Where the animals originate? Here in America. And men double our size, giants, and span of years. And they live long. Are we talking about antediluvians here? And the same are great cities. Alright, great cities. We just talked about them, right? Those great cities. Which laws and customs of a life wholly different from ours. This land possesses great quantities of gold and silver. Oh yeah, we gotta be talking about over here. Alright, we're gonna get that drop too, the gold drop, which are reckoned by these peoples as a less value than iron is with us. Right, so much gold, it wasn't of value to us. Among these cities are two greater than the rest, one named Maximus, the other Eusebius. They're quite unlike. Maximus is warlike, pleasure. This is how Columbus described the Indians when he got here. We got that on part 2, right, of this series. They are so exactly just that the gods many times vouchsafe to converse with them. The gods even talk to them. The other inhabitants are continually armed and fighting and subdue their neighbors. The other ones are like always in their nature of fighting, right? Who does this today? Trying to always debate and fight and argue. It's in their nature, right? It's in their spirit. Sometimes they die of sickness, but this rarely happens. Most commonly, they are killed in war by stones or wood, where they are invulnerable to steel. There follows a story of great invasion of Europe by the warlike race of this Atlantean continent, alright? And two people named Marceline and Avienus make statements about this great island continent. And it says Marceline, in the Atlantic Sea, in the European sphere, is a more worthy island. He is capped by Avienus, who seems to refer to America, alright? Fruitful in the ocean stretchlands and beyond backwards, other shores stretch to another world, alright? This battle of Atlantean warriors and old Greeks figured on the Peplos. See how they got old Greeks, parentheses, after we're saying Atlantis versus old Greeks, talking about the original Greeks. We're talking about the old world, true old world here in America. Figured on Peplos, an embroidered robe, which used to be carried round in Plato's own day, in the harbor streets of Athens at a festival of the goddess Athena. One old Greek writer named Crantor, who lived in 310 BC, says he actually was shown pillars in a temple by the Nile, where the Egyptian priest said that there was a pictured in hieroglyphics the history of the drowned continent of Atlantis. Alright? Now again, we've got this numerous times in my past videos, and I've told you a lot. I'm trying to explain to you that the Greeks, every time they were talking about their mythology, the gods and all this, Titans, Atlantis, they were always talking about America. And that, you know, the Greeks are letting you know that even in Egypt, right, when they went to Egypt, whatever that is, you know, we don't know they're talking about the one in modern day, alright, because I believe they were coming a lot over here when they were traveling to these Egyptian places. So they're saying that even in Egypt, they saw in their temples hieroglyphics with the story about Atlantis, right? So it's called Mysteries of Ancient South America by Harold T. Wilkins, all right? Here as evidence in the shape of amazing ruins of dead cities in the jungles and on the unexplored plateau between Goiás and the Rio Roosevelt of modern Brazil, today attest to those who have seen them. There lived between 15,000 and 10,000 BC, perhaps even earlier, a highly civilized race of handsome, intellectual men and beautiful women with classic Greek features. Also, he knows who exactly was there. Remember I told you, he keeps saying that it's white people, right? White pale-faced people. So now he's saying they got Greek features, whatever that means. The original Greeks were Negro, so what is he talking? Right? We already know that, right? It was the original Greeks and Romans. These are Moors too. And often bright red hair like that of Berenice. Now was he talking about giants now? Oh yeah, there were giants there too. But they were not Greek in origin, nor any colony from old Greece. They lived in the walled cities, walled not against savages, but the mighty Gulf of the Marañón, an older name of the Amazon, alright, the Mar Añón, Anon, A-N-O-N, get that drop from 432, the drop radio, about the Strait of Anion, right, the River Anon, right, the River Anon in the Bible, we got Marañón, or Marañón, Mar Anon, the Sea of Anon, the Sea of Anon, the Anon Sea. It says the older name of the Amazon. They had a gold coinage, fleets, cities of shining white stone, with magnificent plazas, paved with great flags. Alright? What do they have? Cities of shining white stone. Alright? And magnificent plazas. And exquisitely ornamented temples and great mansions with fine fountains. Alright? So now we got the accounts of all, you know, how Central America had those cities and everything. Now we're getting accounts here in Brazil, alright, in the Amazon. We got temples, great mansions, fine fountains. Their coasts were lit by pharaohs or lighthouses for mariners. You hear that? Lenses they had invented and reflectors they knew, which are the elements of the astronomical telescope. They built peculiar pyramids rounded at the tops, and their ruins seen still today, deep in the jungle. For this is no fantasy of a lost world of fiction. Bear many letters identical with those of the Phoenician and Greek alphabet, as well as other forms of bizarre and more archaic shape. Native traditions say they used a light which seems akin to that of the electric bulb. Alright, we had all type of electricity up in here. Alright, so it says Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. Alright, so there was again the book by Costas Le Plongeon. Alright, again, we're in the introduction of this book. We shall begin the interpretation of the symbol with the analysis of the character that Landa tells us, this one right here they're talking about, stood among the Maya's writers. either for ma, me, or mo. Alright? Alright? Some would be critics among the Americanists. Our contemporaries have accused the bishop of ignorance regarding the writing system of the Mayas, or an incompetency in transmitting to us the true value of this character, simply because he gave it plurality, or what seems to be plurality of meanings. What right, it may be asked, have we to dispute the fact asserted by Bishop Landa that in his time among the Mayas the character was equivalent to ma, and perhaps to me and mo? Had he not better opportunity than any of us for knowing it? Did not the chiefs of the Franciscan order in Yucatan consider it a prime duty to become thoroughly versed and have all their missionaries instructed in the language of the natives to whom they had to preach the gospel? So he's saying a lot of them learned the language. It was mandatory. They had to learn it. That's the only way they could get through and preach their whole doctrine on us and control, right? So it says, and after converting them to Christianity to administer the sacraments of their church, were they not scholars, men conversant with grammatical studies? Who but they have reduced the grammatical rules, the Maya language, for the benefit of students? Are we not told that Bishop Landa acquired a great proficiency in it? Was he not for many years a teacher of it? Has he not composed a grammar of that tongue for the use of his pupils? What right then have men in our age, innocent of all knowledge of Maya language, even as spoken today, however great may be their attainments in any other branch of learning, to pass judgment on worse, or worse still, to condemn a learned teacher of that language, charging him with ignorance and incompetency, simply because he assigns various meanings to a character? Perhaps Mr. Champollion Lejeune will be branded in like manner, because he tells us that the Egyptians, alright, it's about to get deep, alright, let's go into this. Listen to this, because he tells us that the Egyptians represented indifferently the vowels A, I, O, E, alright, by the character. What's that? What's that, everybody? That's a feather, right? It looks like a feather to me. We see effectively, says the learned discoverer of the Egyptian alphabet, the leaf or feather as their homophones to mean, according to the occasion, an A, an E, an E, an I, an E, and even an O, as the Aleph, right, of the Hebrews. So do we find in Egyptian tongue, written with Coptic letters, a dialect that uses indifferently A or O, where the other two write O only, and E, where the other two write A. We have in the same dialect, alright, and he's shown all this, read, rush, alright. He continues, let us resume our explanation now. Alright, so he's broke it down, that what do you mean? You can have different meanings for the same sound or letter, right? Same sound, alright? Especially with those vowels he was pointing out, and it's a feather, interesting, right? Let us resume our explanation. We have found that in remote times, ma was the meaning of the character. Let us try to analyze its component parts in relation to the name Mayak and its origin as an alphabetic character. It is easy to see that it is composed of the geometrical figure. Alright, see that? Flanked on each side by the symbol Imix. Who can fail to see that this figure bears a striking resemblance to the Egyptian sign? Look at that. Alright? You see? It's just flipped. It's the same thing. Alright? So that's what I was trying to tell you about, how he noticed things, because he knew this Egyptian old language. Then he started seeing the same symbols with the Mayas, or within the temples. Talking about the ancient Mayas. It says that Dr. Young translates ma. So this means ma in Egyptian. You understand? Mayak, alright, the symbol. Ma. Alright, so Mr. Champollion asserts to be simply the letter M. Alright, that. By a strange coincidence, if coincidence there be, the meaning of the syllable ma is the same in Maya and Egyptian. Alright, same. That is, in both languages it signifies earth, place. Alright, the Ma, place, Mother Earth, Ma, Mama, Mother, Mama, Mother Earth, Earth, Mama, Wa, the Wa, the knowledge. Wow. Continuing the word, and it says this: place or site, says Mr. Champollion, of the Greek text, this is Greek, of the Rosetta inscription is expressed in the hieroglyphic part of the alphabet by an owl for M and the extended arm for A, which gives the Coptic word Ma, site, place. So same, you see how that is universal, Ma, and where it originates in Mayak over here. We see that in the Toronto manuscript, the author represented the earth by the figure of an old man, the grandfather, Mam, hence by apocope, Ma, earth, site, country, place. Ma in the Maya is also a particle used as in the Greek language, an affirmation or negation according to its position before or after the verb. Another curious coincidence worthy of notice is that the sign of negation is also, alright, absolutely the same for the Mayas as for the Egyptians. You see that? Alright, go back to the Maya. See that? Bunsen says that the latter called it Nen. That word in Maya means mirror, and Nenha, the mirror of waters, was anciently one of the names of the Mexican Gulf. This also may be a coincidence. You see that? No one has ever told us why the learned hierogrammatist of Egypt gave to the sign the value Ma. So how did they come up with this? He's saying the Egyptians. That's what he's trying to tell you. Like, how did they, where's the whole history behind how they learned how to write, language, build pyramids? There is none. When we were growing up, they taught us in school that it was like a legacy. Just came out of nowhere. And then there was a mystery, civilization that united all of them. And then they had aliens and all that stuff, right? But either way, how did they come to this sign, right? The value of Ma. How did they give that Ma? No one can, because nobody knows the origin of the Egyptians, of their civilization, nor the country where it grew from infancy to maturity. You can research that. They grew us up with all this, because I've been a history, I like history all my life, and I was interested in history and all that. And yeah, they always kept telling that it was a legacy. They didn't really understand how they came out of nowhere, right? And then all of a sudden they had civilization. Alright, so he's letting you know the same thing, same exact thing. Alright, just grew out of nowhere from infancy to maturity. They themselves, although they invariably pointed toward the setting sun, the west, when questioned concerning the fatherland of their ancestors, were ignorant of who they were and whence they came. Nor did they know who was the inventor of the alphabet. The Egyptians, who, no doubt, had forgotten or had never known the name of the inventor of their phonetic signs at the time of Plato, honored with it one of their gods of the second order, Thoth. Alright, here we go. Thoth. The Jehuti, alright? The Atlantean, right? Here we go. I told you, Thoth. He's the jackal. He's the dog. He's Nubis, Hermes, Mercury, the trickster. That's him. Alright, so let's go. It says the Egyptians, who no doubt had forgotten or had never known the name of the inventor of their phonetic signs at the time of Plato, honored with it one of their gods of the second order, Thoth. So they gave Thoth the credit for creating the alphabet, at least for them, right? But where did Thoth get all his knowledge? Who likewise was held as the father of all sciences and arts. All right, here we go. We get into hermetics, alchemy, and all that other stuff. Hellenistic teachings. Then we get into Serapis. Then we get into Zeus and Greeks, and it keeps going. All right, so since we just mentioned Thoth in that book, I just wanted to real quick, since we're fresh with your whole Thoth idea. I told you, I'm always telling you that keeps saying that he's from Atlantis and everything. This was a correlation I had from way, like 2-3 years ago. When I was doing my Thoth videos, actually. So this book is called Atlantis, Atlantology Basic Problems by N. Zeroff. All right, and just want to read a part of this real quick to correlate what I've been saying. All right. It says here, fascinating study of the god Tav was published in 1898 by the well-known Russian Egyptologist B.A. Turayev. As sources for his study, he used mainly the writings of the pyramids, inscriptions on pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty, the Book of the Dead, a collection of rituals for the dead, fully compiled only in the Size epoch, and the writings of the sarcophaguses of the 6th and 7th dynasty. All these texts are written in the name of a deceased identified with one of the gods. All right, so then it explains a little bit about Tav, who he was, and he was Hermes and all that. Right, we know that. There is good reason to believe that although Tav was an ancient deity, he was introduced from some Western land. All right, he came from a Western land. Remember, he said he came from Atlantis himself in the Emerald Tablets. In all ancient hieroglyphic inscriptions, he is linked up with the West. Did you know that? All the hieroglyphics, all the Book of the Dead, and everything about regarding his story always links him with the West, that he was coming from the West. Did you know that? Do you even read any hieroglyphics? Do you know the history? All right, a lot of these Pan-Africans don't even read these things, don't even know or correlate this. All right, it's all over there. Which was dedicated to him. The West was dedicated to him. In chapter 161 of the Book of Dead, he plays the same role that the Hellenes ascribed to Atlas. All right, we have the Book of the Dead. We're gonna go into this. So he's the same as Atlas. Remember Atlas? Who was Atlas? The son of Poseidon, the first king of Atlantis. That is Thoth, first king of Atlantis, Thoth. All right, in the Book of the Dead, he plays the same role ascribed to Atlas. All right, chapter 161. He supports the vault of the heavens at its four corners. In the inscription of the pharaohs, Userir-an, Thoth is called the ruler of overseas land. He is also called by the puzzle name of providential guide of both lands, east and west. Usually he was portrayed with the head of an ibis and most his body. Statues and also portrayals on sarcophaguses was painted green. Alright, so very important, because the green ibis, if you didn't know, alright, I'm just gonna let you know where he's from. We're at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Neotropical Birds, alright, at university website. And this is the green ibis right here. Let me just zoom in. Alright, the green ibis, right? Thoth, right? What does it say? The green ibis is a dark colored ibis of wetlands and swampy woods in Central and South America. Not from over there, Egypt, not from Asia. This specific ibis, the green one, is actually from the Americas. The green ibis is resident in lowlands from Honduras, alright, south to northern Argentina. This is the area of the ibis. Alright, we have them in Costa Rica. Alright, this is where it's found, the green ibis. The green ibis, alright? So again, back in the book, Atlantis, Atlantology, Basic Problems. Again, he's represented as an ibis and was painted what? Green. The green ibis from Central America, alright? Now it says here, the data on Thoth's birthplace are also interesting. In the inscription on the pyramid of the pharaoh Pepi I of the 6th dynasty, his name is mentioned in a connection with the undeciphered name of a town, but a B.A. Turayev points out this town was not Hermopolis, which is not mentioned in the writings of the pyramids. Thoth's birthplace is named in chapter 24 of the Book of the Dead, and in the hymn of the pharaoh Ramses the Fourth. So go look this up. All right, it is the mysterious, undeciphered lake of the flame of NSRS. All right, so it's something to do with a lake of flame, a place where there was a lake of flame of fire. All right, mysterious, a mysterious place. All right, it doesn't say he was from Hermopolis. All right, this is what they're letting you know. All right, the lake of two fires. Many ancient writings refer to the lake of Thoth, the lake of Thoth. All right, it should be borne in mind that the ancient Egyptians had no direct knowledge of volcanic activity. There's no volcanoes over there in Egypt on that side. You get what they're trying to tell you right here? Because this lake of flames, this lake of fire, that's where it's going. It was a volcanic, something happened. Now, saying if we assume that people from volcanic localities came to Egypt in some remote age, This might explain the vague references to volcanoes and why as time went by these references became incomprehensible and acquired the aura of fantasy, because it became a legend, because we're like, what is a volcano? What do you mean a mountain that blows fire? And it says here, there is a myth which says that Thoth saved other deities during a cosmic catastrophe on the sun, which was ill after it had been abused by somebody. Alright? That's in the Book of the Dead. Thoth's role as savior is mentioned in chapter 1797 of the Book of the Dead. And he actually talks about that in the Emerald Tablets, how he'd say, hey, let's get on my ship, let's go over there. Alright? Further employing wings, Thoth carried the deities to the eastern side of the sky, you see? He carried them, he took them over there, to the far side of the lake, Ha. Now it says all this, right? If we sum up all that we have said about Thoth, we shall get the following somewhat fantastic picture. Listen to this, right? If you do all this research behind Thoth, if you actually do research of his origin and the beginning of Thoth and everything that surrounds him, and even his own words saying, right, he came from Atlantis, right? If we sum this all up, we shall get the following somewhat fantastic picture. Thoth, listen to this, came from a distant land, perhaps that happy western land of Amenti, to marry Amenti. Amenti is America. Remember, we read that earlier, where the souls of the dead passed on to Aru, Amaru, Aru, plum serpent. In that land, there was a town by a large lake or sea. There was a town and a sea and a lake, a city and a lake. Oh man! And in its vicinity were two active volcanoes. There was two volcanoes where Thoth is from, and a city and a lake. A city and a lake, and there was two active volcanoes. Then some cosmic event took place in the land of Thoth's birth. Something happened in the land of Thoth's. We're talking about the Americas, right? He's from here, Atlantis, something happened. And the sun was eclipsed for a long span of time. Perhaps this eclipse was due to the eruption of a volcano. In any case, the gods were terrified. Thoth, who was the wisest among them, helped them to flee to the east across a large lake or sea. While they were on their way, the sun returned to its normal state. There is a possibility that this myth is an echo of the catastrophe that overwhelmed Atlantis. Alright, so think about this, alright? Thoth told you himself he's coming from Atlantis. Now, if you look at all the ancient history behind him in Egypt, he came from a lake of fire, a place where there was volcanoes, a distant land of the west. He was called one of the Westerners. A lot of the gods were called the Westerners, all right? Like Osiris and Isis, Westerners, all right? Now, I want to show you something. Remember, you see, he said city and a lake, right? A town or a large lake or a sea, a city and a lake, all right? So, where do we find a city and a lake? A famous city and a lake? You tell me what are we looking at right here? What are we looking at right here, everybody? Yes, this is Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan is a city that was built in a lake. And guess what? You see these two white peaks over here? These mountaintops all the way over here in the back, towards the right? Those are two famous volcanoes, part of their mythology as well, that overlook the Valley of Mexico. Alright, remember, it told us that Thoth lived in the city and the lake, surrounded by two volcanoes. Two volcanoes. Look at all these tree stumps over here. Two volcanoes, alright? And these are the two volcanoes. Alright, it says Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl. It says refers to the volcanoes, right? Smoky Mountain, one of them is named, and Iztaccíhuatl means white woman. Alright, which overlooked the Valley of Mexico. They overlooked the Valley of Mexico, and the various myths explaining their existence. The most common variety relates to Nahua romance and princess Iztaccíhuatl, the warrior Popocatépetl. This tale is recorded in several different versions. Alright, so there's already, again, a view. Look at that, two volcanoes, right? View of the Puebla Valley with Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl in the distance, 1906, alright? So these two volcanoes overlook Tenochtitlan, which is in the Valley of Mexico. Now again, what it is to say? That where he's from, in the land of Thoth, there was a town by a large lake, alright? And in its vicinity were two active volcanoes. Two active volcanoes. Two active volcanoes, alright? City and a lake. City in a lake, this is Mexico, with two active volcanoes, alright? Two active volcanoes. city in a lake with 2 active volcanoes. Alright? City in a lake. Any questions? Let's go back to the book now, Queen Mu. Alright, so it is evident that we can learn nothing from the Egyptians of the motives that prompted the inventor of their alphabetical characters to select that peculiar figure to represent the letter M, initial of their word Ma. The Mayas, we are informed, made use of the identical sign and ascribed to it the same signification. We may perhaps find out from them the reason that induced their learned men to choose this strange geometrical figure as part of their symbol for Ma. Alright? We're going to learn from the Mayas. He's saying, why this symbol, right? We're going to show the origin, right? Radical of Mayak, name of the peninsula of Yucatan. Who knows but that the same cause which prompted them to adopt it suggested it also to the mind of the Egyptian hierogrammatist? Of course they did. Thoth is from here, right? If they're giving credit to Thoth, Thoth came from here. So that they adopted it from us. Many will no doubt object that this may all be pure coincidence. The two peoples live so far apart. Very true. I do not pretend it is not accidental. I merely suggest a possibility that, added to other facts, many later become a probability, if not a certainty. Alright, it's going to show you facts. The course of these pages, which we shall meet with so many concurrent facts as having existed both in Mayak and Egypt. He's going to show you so many facts that they had similar that it goes beyond coincidence to possibility, right? Then a probability, then certainty. You're going to see. And we've already known, we've gone over so much info, right? Alright, so he's just breaking it down, his experience with it, right? He was over there in those temples and stuff, and he was able to read these hieroglyphs using an old Egyptian language or hieroglyphic system. Alright? Says Mayak in Egypt that it will become difficult to reconcile the mind to the belief that they are altogether the identical working of the human intelligence groping its way out of barbarism to civilization, as some have more than once hinted. So he's saying, because they teach everybody, well, maybe just humans just naturally went that way, right? They started as barbarians, hunters and gatherers, blah, 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 the language, and it just happened. But they're saying they try to teach us there's no real source for it, because they can't explain how the Egyptians and the Sumerians and all these people just came out with language and, you know, pyramid building and all that. There's no real history behind it, right? So they try to create these stories for us to be like, okay, yeah, I guess so, that will work, all right? So they have hinted that as a last resort, he says, in their inability to deny the striking concordances of these facts. We are told that in the origin of languages, names were given to places, objects, tribes, individuals, or animals in accordance with some peculiar inherent properties possessed by them, such as a shape, voice, customs, etc., and to countries on account of their climate, geological formation, geographical configuration, or any other characteristic that is by onomatopoeia. This assertion seems to find confirmation in the symbol of the Mayas. Alright, same symbol. In the name Mayak forms no exception to the rule. In fact, if we draw around the Yucatan Peninsula a geometrical figure enclosing it and composed of straight lines by following the direction of its eastern, northern, and western coast, it is easy to see that the drawing so made, so it says the Yucatan Peninsula, this is the very tip, alright, will inevitably be the symbol. Alright, the fact alone might not be deemed proof sufficient to affirm that the Mayas in reality did derive their sign for Ma from this cause, since to complete it as transmitted by Landa, the character emix is wanting on each side. It does not require very great effort of the imagination to understand what this sign is meant for. A single glance will suffice to satisfy us that the drawing is intended to represent a woman's breast with its nipple and areola. Alright, you see that? Anyone inclined to doubt that such is the case will soon be convinced by examining the female figures portrayed in the Toronto manuscript. Alright, the mama giving us nourishment, the motherland. Yes, Imix is the breast, the bosom called today simply Im. The word having suffered the apocope of its dissonance, Ix, which is a copulative conjunction and the sign of the feminine gender, Ix. But bosom is also an enclosed place. We say the bosom of the deep. Le sein de la terra, el seno de los mares. It was in that sense indeed that the Maya sages, who invented the characters and symbols with which to give their thoughts a material form, made use of it. These are the real inventors who were basically inventing language and symbols and hieroglyphics. This is how it all came about, because it was something of their thoughts in material form. They put their thoughts in material form, hieroglyphics. This fact becomes apparent if alright, so this is the footnotes right here, right? The Toronto manuscript. So this is one of them that was talking about, you see? Oh, and it gets deep in the footnotes too. I mean, wow. It says the figures are anthropomorphous representations of the kneeling, supplication female of the land of Mu, the male of the Lord of the Seven Fires, volcanoes of the land of Mu. Wow, you see that? Posing posture, Florin Pasha comes to inform him that one of his volcanoes has caused the basin of the edge of her domains to rise, and has converted the country into marshy ground. She speaks thus, Ak Hape Bek Imi Khan, that is, the basin has risen rapidly and the land has become marshy. Wow, you see that? That's in the Toronto manuscript, that's Mu, according to his interpretation. Alright, so let's continue what we're reading. It says, so we're talking about the Maya sages, alright, they thought, they put their thoughts in material form. That's how they created a hieroglyphic system and writing. This fact becomes apparent if we examine the drawing still more closely and notice the 4 lines drawn in the lower part as if to shade it. If we consider each line as equivalent to 1 unit, their sum represents the numerical 4, Khan, in the Maya language. We have already seen that Khan also means serpent, one of the symbols for the sea, Kana, Kanan, Kana. Then the 2 Imix are placed one on each side of the geometrical figure, image of the peninsula, to typify the 2 gulfs whose waters bathe its shores. On the left, that of Mexico, on the right, the Caribbean Sea. That this was the idea of the inventors of the symbol is evident, for as the Gulf of Mexico is smaller than the Caribbean Sea, and the western coastline of Yucatan shorter than the eastern, so in the drawing, the Imix on the left of the figure is smaller than the Imix on the right, and the line on the left shorter than that on the right. So I hope you see what he's saying. Guys, so this symbol, right? This was a little smaller and this side smaller. Yucatan Peninsula, the sea, and the Caribbean, both waters. So this explanation being correct is clearly proves as much as a proposition of that nature can be demonstrated, that the character owes its origin amongst the Mayas to the configuration of the Yucatan Peninsula and its position between 2 gulfs, and that of the inventors were acquainted with their extent and contour. Not a few, even among well-read people, often express a doubt as to the ancient Mayas having possessed accurate information respecting the existence of the various continents and islands that form the inhabitable portions of the earth, questioning likewise if they were acquainted even with the geography and configuration of the lands in which they lived, seeming to entertain the idea that the science of general geography belongs exclusively to modern times. The name Maya, found among all civilized nations of antiquity in Asia, Africa, Europe, as well as in America. Alright, so listen to this, because that's true. You will find the word Maya all over the world. Alright? Always with the same meaning. Should be sufficient to prove that in very remote ages the Mayas had intimate relations with the inhabitants of the lands situated on those continents, were therefore great travelers. So it continues, says, has all these nations had an age, Africa, Europe, as well as in America, always with the same meaning. All right, it should be sufficient to prove that in very remote ages, the Mayas had intimate relations with the inhabitants of the land situated on those continents. All right, so real quick, we're in encyclopediabritannica.com. All right, and it says here we're talking about Maya, or the mother of who? Gautama Buddha, Guatemala, Maya, mother, Maya, the mother of all the gods. Mahamaya, also called Maya, the mother of Gautama Buddha. She was the wife of Raja Shuddhodana, it says here, right? Gautama Buddha, Guatemala, Guatemala or Gautama, Guatemala, all right? Guatemala. What does it say here? The lost history of the little people. They're spiritually advanced. And it says here, let me see, it says the hub, had to be Central America. For all indicators, mark it as one of the first colonies established from the motherland, the inundated Pacific lands. They're talking about Mu, right? The particular spot where they landed was Mexico. The capital city of the Quetzals was established thereabouts in Guatemala. And then it says, what does it say? Guatemala, in parentheses, right? It's not just me correlating this. It's very old name of the Americas. Guatemala is a very old name of the Americas. One of the 5 landing places after the flood, hence Guatemala. Alright, one of the landing places after the flood. These Quetzals of milk white skin, dodge the hijack, were the first foreign settlers in Mesoamerica. Guatemala is the nation of the Quiche Maya people, and in South America, its cognate Quechua is the language spoken by their long-lost cousins, the Incas. Alright, cousins of the who? Quiches, Quichua, Quiche, Quechua. Quechua, Cusco means navel, right? Cusco, alright? And it keeps going. But look at how that book correlates what I was just saying, right? About Guatemala, the first land out of the flood, after the flood, the motherland, one of the motherlands, alright, Guatemala. The lost history of the little people. They're spiritually advanced. Look at that. Little people. Wow. Alright, so they have been acquainted with people all over the world, he's saying. The Mayas. Alright, it says we must not lose sight of the fact that we know but very little indeed of the ancient American civilizations. The annals of the learned men of Mayak having been either hidden or destroyed, it is impossible for us to judge of the scope of their scientific attainments. That they were expert architects, the monuments built by them that have resisted for ages the disintegrating action of the elements and that of vegetation, bear an ample testimony, all right? So even with the weather and everything, it's not like the one over there in Egypt, all right? These, even with all that stuff, they're still there, these monuments, he's saying, built by expert architects, all right? Expert architects. The analysis of the gnomon discovered by the writer in the ruins of the ancient city of Mayapan in 1880 proves conclusively that they had made an advance in the science of astronomy. They knew as well as we do how to calculate the latitudes and longitudes, the epochs of the solstices and of the equinoxes, the division of time into solar years of 365 days and 6 hours, that of the year into 12 months of 30 days. All right, where did they learn all this stuff in the calendars and all that? Where did that come from? Over here. To which they added 5 supplementary days that were left without name and regarded as inauspicious. During these, as on the 3rd day of the epoch among the Egyptians, all businesses was suspended. All right, they did not even go out of their houses, lest some misfortune should befall them. See that? Is that like a Sabbath, keeping like a rest day? Alright, resting, don't go, not doing anything. All those calculations required, of course, of thorough knowledge of algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and other branches of mathematics, you see. To do all that, you needed all this science and all this math. Alright, and the Mayas had that. That they were no mean draftsmen and sculptors. The fresco paintings, inscriptions, and bas-reliefs carved on marble that are still extant bear unimpeachable testimony. All these things carved in marble. You know how hard that is? The study of the Toronto manuscript will convince anyone that the learned author of the book, and no doubt many of his associates, had not only a thorough knowledge of the geographical configuration of the western continent and the adjacent islands, but also of their geological formation. The lands of the West, the lands of the West are represented by these symbols, which some have translated Atlan, lands of the West, Atlan, Atlantis. We have a lake called Atlantle right here. We got Atlanta, right? Atlantic Ocean. They have no room for doubting that the Mayas were acquainted with the eastern coast of said continent, from the Bay of St. Lawrence in latitude north 48 degrees to Cape St. Roque in Brazil in latitude south 5 degrees 28. The two signs of the locality placed under the symbol represent the two large regions of the western continent, North and South America, whilst the signs, these two, seen within the curved figure in the northern basin of the Atlantic, stand for the land of Mu. The land of Mu, alright? That extensive island now submerged under the waves of the ocean. Oh, you hear that? The sign, as well as this, that forms the upper part of the symbol, is familiar to all students of Egyptology. All right, so if you know Egyptian language, then you should be familiar with these symbols. He's saying these will tell you that the first meant in the Egyptian hieroglyphics the sun setting on the horizon, and the second the mountainous countries in the west. All right. So where does the sun set? In the west, right? And then the mountainous. This is symbols the Egyptians had for these places. And they was talking about America. Listen, as to the conventional posture given to all the statues of the rulers and other illustrious personages in Mayak, it confirms the fact that their geographical attainments, if we compare, for instance, the outlines of the effigy of Prince Ko, discovered by the author at Chichen Itza in 1875, within the contour of the eastern coast of the American continent, placing the head of the Newfoundland, the knees of Cape St. Roque, and the feet at Cape Horn, it is easy to perceive that they are identical. The shallow basin held on the belly of the statue between the hands would then be symbolical of the Gulf of Mexico and of the Caribbean Sea. Again, the outlines of the profile of the statue may also represent with great accuracy the eastern shores of the Maya Empire, the head being the peninsula of Yucatan, anciently the seat of the government. The knees would then correspond to Cape Gracias a Dios in Nicaragua, the feet of the Isthmus of Darien, the southern boundary of the empire, and the shallow basin of the belly would in that case stand for the Bay of Honduras, part of the Caribbean Sea. The Antilles were known to the Mayas as the land of the scorpion, the Antilles, the Caribbean islands, Sinan, and were represented by the Maya hieroglyphist by the figure of that arachnid, or in his cursive writing by this other. Alright, that's the scorpion. So if they represented a scorpion, they were talking about the Caribbean, or if they represented this symbol. Alright. Continues as proof evident that he was as well acquainted as we are with the general outlines of the archipelago, alright, Caribbean. Alright, so let's go back, look at this symbol right here again. Alright, so that's the Caribbean they're saying. Alright, was that the whole North and South America stuff, what they were saying earlier, how they were describing Newfoundland, South America. Alright, so he's trying to break all these symbols down, is what he's letting you know, what these glyphs, we got a little bit of all these little specific symbols here. So, alright. If we examine the map of the lands back of the peninsula, it will not be difficult to discover the idea uppermost in the mind of the draughtsman at the time of composing the symbol, and to see that he was as thoroughly acquainted with the geography of the interior and the western shores of those parts of the continent, as with the configuration of its eastern coast, also that their geological formations was no mystery to him. By comparing this symbol with the shape of the countries immediately south of the peninsula, notwithstanding the changes that are continually taking place in the contour of the coastlines, particularly at the mouth of rivers, by the actions of currents, etc., we cannot fail to recognize that the hydrogrammatists assumed it to be the sprout of the calabash, the body of which was represented by the lands compromised within the segment of a circle having for radius the half of a line parallel to the eastern and western shores of the peninsula, starting from Point Lagartos on the northern coast of Yucatan, drawn across the country to the shore of the Pacific Ocean on the south. Alright, so look what they're trying to break down. So you see with the symbol, right, of the Ma, and then like this circumference would be that whole land, that like that whole epicenter, like of the government. All right, this radius is where he's saying that's represented in that glyph. All right. For if from the middle of said line as center, we describe a circumference, part of it will follow exactly the bent of the coastline of said ocean, opposite the northern shore of the peninsula. Another part will cross the isthmus of Tehuantepec, the northern frontier of the Maya Empire, and if carried over land on the south until it intersects the seaboard of the Bay of Honduras. The segment of the circle thus formed resembles the bottom of a calabash, and the peninsula the sprout. Analyzing the character yet more closely, we see a line of dots on each side of the base of the sprout, the root of which is made to repose on the curled figure, intended to represent the curling of the smoke as it ascends into the air from the crater of the volcanoes among the mountains, indicated as on our maps by the etching on both sides of the body of the symbol. These tokens prove that the designer knew the geological formation of the country in which he lived, and that the peninsula had been upheaved from the bottom. Alright, this peninsula came up from the bottom of the sea by the action of volcanic forces, whose center of activity was in his time, as it still is, in the mountains of Guatemala, alright, far away in the interior of the continent. By placing the small end of the sprout deep into the figure on the focus of the volcanic action, on the curling line of the smoke, and by the dots on both sides of the root of the sprout, he shows that he knew that the upheaval of the peninsula was affected by the expansive force of the gases, which produce earthquakes by their pressure on the uneven undersurface of the superficial strata, too homogeneous to permit their escape. Thus, it is that we come to learn from the pen of an ancient Maya philosopher that the name of his people, once upon a time so broadly scattered over the face of the earth, had its origin in that of the country they inhabited, or at the time of the word Maya, a place situated in the northern tropical parts of western continent, in that land of Cuy, where the sprout is, in Guatemala, that mysterious home of their ancestors, where the Egyptians thought the souls of their departed friends went to dwell, the underworld, which was known to its inhabitants as Mayak, Mayak, the land of Cuy, a word that in their language meant the first land. The land just sprouted, the first land, motherland, also the hard land, the terra firma. As we learn from the sign of aspiration, hardness, coagulation, place each side of the body of the calabash to indicate perhaps the rocky formation of its soil, and that it had withstood the awful cataclysms which swept from the face of the earth the land of Mu, and many other places with their populations. The priests of Egypt, Chaldea, and India preserved the remembrance of their destruction in the archives of their temples, as did those of the Mayak on the other side of the ocean. Alright? So this is, they're saying, the destruction of the land of Mu, and that everybody knew about this. The latter did not content themselves with recording the relation in their treatise on geology and history, but in order to preserve its memory for future generations, they caused it to be carved on a stone tablet, which they fastened to a wall in one of the apartments of their college at Chichen, where it is yet seen, still there. The natives have perpetuated from generation to generation for centuries the name of that inscription. They still call it Akab, Ibit, or Sib, Akab Sib, the awful, the tenebrous writing. So real quick, I just want to go to the footnote here, talk about the land of Kui. It says 1 right here before we continue. And it says 1, right? Look what it says. It says, Sir Gardner Wilkinson, Manners and Customs of Ancient Egyptians, Volume 3, page 70. All right, get that. Kui land. All right, Kui land. According to the Maya language, the land of the gods. The birthplace of the goddess Maya. The goddess who? Maya. The mother of gods, of men. The feminine energy of Brahma, by whose union with Brahma all things were produced. All right, who is Buddha's mom? Maya. Her name is Maya, and his name is Watama. Watamala. Watama. We're talking about Guatemala, right? Being the sprout, the place where they all spring up, all those volcanoes creating land, the first land. All right, look that up. That's in Manners and Customs of Ancient Egyptians, Volume 3. Talking about Kui land, according to Maya language, the land of the gods, the birthplace of all their gods, even in Egypt. So continues, says the history of that terrible catastrophe, recounted in various ways in the sacred books of the different nations, among which vestiges of the present of the Mayas are to be found, continues to be a appalling tradition of great portion of mankind. All right, so that is the introduction of this book, and then it goes into Queen Moon, Egyptian things, the whole, chapter 1 and everything. All right, so he's just breaking it down. He's letting you know which is the terrestrial paradise, which one is the first land out of the waters, and what Mayak and Maya means. I try to interpret these glyphs in a different way. All right, and it's a lot of it has related to Egypt, right? Because Egypt always told us that the Western land was where the ancestors came, the first people on the earth. Herodotus quoted this. All right, around here, Guatemala. All right, so this is over here, Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua, Honduras. All right, so Central America. All right, this peninsula, surrounded by waters. All right. All right, so real quick, we're in
The so-called Amazonian cities.
Yes.
So London around the 16th century, 60,000 population. There were cities there.
There were enormous cities in the Amazon. This is another piece of the new evidence that's overwhelming the old ideas. Because the old idea was that there were no humans in the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago, that the Amazon, although it's a luxuriant rainforest, has poor soils, and that it was impossible for human beings in large numbers to survive there. We now know they did, and the reason we know they did is tragically because of the clearances of the Amazon. So much of the Amazon has been cut down, and in those areas that have been cut down, evidence of enormous cities has emerged. Cities with populations of tens of thousands, bigger than London at the same time. And not only that, but evidence of high science, geometric geoglyphs on the earth on a scale of hundreds of meters, squares, circles. They even performed the exercise that we attribute to the ancient Greeks of squaring the circle, a very sophisticated geometrical exercise. You can see that done on a scale of hundreds of meters in the Amazon.
So it's called Mysteries of Ancient South America by Harold T. Wilkins. All right. All right, so this book says right here, we're on page 92, all right? It says, the reader may recall the remarkable statement of the old bandeiristas that the statue of the Colossus he saw in the dead city had his hand outreached toward the north. When this manuscript first saw the light in the archives of a historical society in Rio de Janeiro in 1840, this reference to the north led a Copenhagen professor to suggest that the strange letters were runes, and that the Scandinavians had reached ancient South America. So impressed was the King of Denmark that he even detailed a warship to go to Rio and land a lieutenant who had orders to go up the country and find these statues and the dead city of Hyperborean suggestion. Here, one may recall that the Jew prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah, now listen to this, located the ancient paradise and Garden of Eden in the north. But if the reader glances at a map, he will see that that north of Brazil corresponds to that very Amenti land, or land of the dead. Amenti from Egypt, Halls of Amenti Thoth, paradise of the ancient Egyptians. And the Celt, under another name of the Royal or High Atlantean Brazil, High Brazil. They're telling you north of Brazil, right? Which the people of the pharaohs said lay to the west of the Nile. Moreover, there was a man who was 12th king in the calendar of the Mayas, and whose country, Guatemala, was a Nile. You hear this? And whose country, what? Guatemala was a Nile, who corresponds closely with the Menes of ancient Egypt, who built the temple of Memphis and turned the course of the Nile of Egypt. Alright, you hearing all this? Brazil, the old and mysterious, seems to be the ancient land, which was perhaps the cradle of the world's oldest civilization. Maybe 60,000 years ago, in a day when our own European ancestors were living in caves in then far warmer regions, what is now Pyrenean France, Cantabrian Spain, or Lacustrine Switzerland. Alright, they're letting you know, this guy. What happened? That seems that Brazil seems to have the ancient land, which was perhaps the cradle of the world's oldest civilization, cradle of the world. Alright, we're talking about, Graham Hancock showing us that they found evidence of at least 100,000 years of human occupation in the Amazon. This guy said 60,000 years ago. We're talking about the Maya said they got the roots. It's in South America, but their empire went all the way up to the Mayas, alright? All the way to region there. It too is the mecca of the treasure hunter, prepared to risk death in very unpleasant forms in order to trail the whereabouts of ancient gold mines or lost mines of platinum, which later appears on cryptic charts and derroteros made by wandering Jesuit missionaries of the late 16th and 17th centuries. Alright, the fertile land, and deposited in the old Viceroyal Lusitanian archives, now found in the Biblioteca Nacional de Rio de Janeiro. Many of these lost mines or caches lie deep in the virgin forests of Brazil. Some of them were the quest of those hardy and valiant land pirates, the bandeiristas of Sao Paulo, who waged war on Jesuit missions and reducciones, where mining was done by the fathers with Indian aid, the servants, encomiendas, in the 17th and 18th centuries. When I was in Rio in 1938, I heard about a French engineer. Alright, so real quick, he said Indians, right, not Africans, work in the mines. Apollinaire Fraud, who had gone into the unknown region west of the Goyas Plateau to search for some very ancient gold mines. For half a century, Fraud had hunted these ancient mines, and in the course of his wanderings had stumbled on ancient rock inscriptions in Amazonas and the Mato Grosso woods, which to his amazement revealed the amazing fact that the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians, listen to this, what did he find in the Amazon, this guy? That the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were of South American origin. They were from South America and had left these petroglyphs as portalanos to the location of the ancient gold mines they worked, and which are now shrouded in dense bush and lianas, hunted by poisonous snakes, loathsome insects whose bite is pathogenic, and dangerous animals, in some cases swamps of vast size, border the ancient mines. And here again, if Indian stories are not entirely mythical, tracks, huge and recognized, left in the slime of the marshy beaches by monsters of Mesozoic type, leave no doubt as to what sort of lost world lies behind. I shall refer to this aspect of mysterious South America in a subsequent book. Alright, again, he's letting you know that the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians were of South American origin. Alright, it was the true old world. Right? Continuing says, other inscribed stones, almost obliterated after thousands of years, have been found in these unknown jungles of Brazil, and purport that Phoenician and their kingsmen, the Carthaginians, also wandered this way thousands of years ago, trading and hunting valuable mineral lodes. Before my reader scouts the idea of these revelations of antique civilization in South America, he or she must remember that more than 2,000 photographs of these ancient petroglyphs have been made by fraud and native prehistorians in Brazilian wilds. Alright, so you can research that. This guy, Frost, alright, or Fraud, found, all these inscriptions there. There's like pictures of this and stuff, alright, of these ancient petroglyphs. Alright, it says in Brazilian wilds, and that the inscriptions range from the hieroglyphic demotic or hierarchic forms to cuneiform or Proto-Phoenician forms, Paleo-Hebrew, such as been found cut in caves on the Canary Islands, or are codified in Jacinius Scripture Linguae Phoenicianae Monumenta. Now, says Fraud had been exploring these wild woods of Brazil since he was a youth. It was in the province of Amazonas that he came on an ancient carved rock hidden by dense jungle close to a river, which recorded the journey of a Proto-Egyptian priest to what is now Bolivia. The ancient inscriptions went on to speak of Proto-Egyptian silver mines located in what is now the basin of Rio Madeira, south of the Madeira Falls. These portolanos in stone must be the oldest treasure shards known. One of them reads as follows. And then look what it's saying. It says that they translated those glyphs and says, "Look out with care for a high hill on whose summit are 6 palm trees. Close by the foot of this hill thou wilt find yet another carved rock telling thee of what lies ahead on the road to the mines of gold we work." Stage by stage, these portolanos and ancient stones ran across central Brazil from some very ancient Proto-Egyptian port which must have been located between Bahia and Rio de Janeiro in the plateau of Goiás, on the edge of the mysterious wilderness which has never at any time been under sea or ice, and which today is known as the Roosevelt Tableland. Fraud found one of these stones while he was running down an old Carthaginian trail. He's finding this all in Brazil. He's talking about Carthaginian trail, right? The clue of the hieroglyphics led him to a very ancient gold mine. Alright, so he found it like Indiana Jones following the clues. In the middle of a virgin forest too thick for him to penetrate. Indeed, many of these ancient Brazilian Bolivian gold mines today are buried in the middle of ancient woods. Fraud says his inscription proved that the ancestors of the Egyptians, now listen to this, long before they passed to Africa and the Nile, had established an ancient South American empire ranging from what is now Bolivia to Bahia. So, wait a minute. So you're saying that before they went over to Africa and the Nile, they already had established an ancient South American empire? So wouldn't that mean that they were from here first? They originated here? If they were here first, why are you calling them Pro-Egyptian? And that's a Greek word. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Who civilized who? Over there in Egypt, again, it just came out of nowhere. Language, writing, they don't know. It's a legacy. They teach us this. They don't know how it originated. Because all this started over here. Alright, this guy's letting you know, Fraud. He found all this in the Amazon. And that he knows that this proves that the Egyptians, long before they passed to Africa and the Nile, had established an ancient South American empire, ranging from what is now Bolivia to Bahia. So while the treasure hunter is deeply engaged in trailing down caches of Proto-Egyptian gold bars and ingots in South America's jungles and foothills, he may by chance blunder on some enigmatical obelisk of unknown age, carved with hieroglyphics and covered with multicolored drawings and imperishable pigments such as Senor Julio Tello found near Trujillo, Peru in 1933. Or he may drop on a Waka. Alright, I've shown you what this means in my Black Panther Wakanda video. Waka, Waka, Wakanda, Waka, Tanka, sacred, spiritual. Alright, so he says, or he may drop on a Waka, ancient treasure tomb, wherein he may find, as did Berliner archaeologists 80 miles east of Cusco towards a Bolivian border, and terra incognita, peculiar ceramics or tubes made of some material like glass, but not glass, being of unknown chemical composition. Alright, so, you see, we got other sources, other people letting you know where's the true old world, what they're finding over here in Brazil. Alright, and we had gotten off the book of Augustus Le Plongeon, right? But I just wanted to come to this book real quick so you can see it's all over all these books. We're going to come back to this book, don't worry, in future videos.